Some families have a foolish habit of getting credit at the stores, and thus frequently purchase many things which might have been dispensed with. Money is in some respects like fire, is a very excellent servant but a terrible master. When you have it mastering you, when interest is constantly piling up against you, it will keep you down in the worst kind of slavery. But let money work for you, and you have the most devoted servant in the world. It is no Iverstunt. There is nothing animate or inanimate that will work so faithfully as money when placed at interest, well secured. It works night and day, and in wet or dry weather. Do not let it work against you if you do. There is no chance for success in life so far as money is concerned. John Randolph, the 262. Semester 6, eccentric Virginian, once exclaimed in Congress, Mr. Speaker, 1, have discovered the philosopher's stone, pay as you go. This is indeed nearer to the philosopher's stone than any alchemist has ever yet arrived. Whatever you do, do with all your might, work at it, if necessary, early and late, in season and out of season, not leaving a stone entombed, and never deferring for a single hour that which can be done just as well now. The old proverb is full of truth and meaning. Whatever is worth doing at all is worth doing well. Many a man acquires a fortune by doing his business thoroughly, while his neighbor remains poor for life, because he only half does it. Ambition, energy, industry, perseverance are indispensable requisites for success in business. Fortune always favors the brave, and never helps a man who does not help himself. It won't do to spend your time like Mr. Microbe in waiting for something to come up. To such men one of two things usually turns up: the poorhouse or the jail, for idleness breeds bad habits and clothes a man in rags. The poor, spendthrift vagabond said to a rich man, I have discovered there is money enough in the world for all of us. If it was equally divided, this must be done, and we shall all be happy together. But, was the response, if everybody was like you, it would be spent in 2 months, and what would you do then? Oh, divide again, keep dividing, of course. One was recently reading in a London paper an account of a philosophic pauper who was kicked out of a cheap boarding house because he could not pay his bill, but he had a roll of papers sticking out of his coat pocket, which, upon examination, proved to be his plan for paying off the national debt of England without the aid of a penny. People have got to do as Cromwell said, not only trust in Providence, but keep the powder dry. Do your part of the work, or you cannot succeed. Mohammed one night, while encamping in the desert, overheard one of his fatigued followers remark, I will loose my camel and trust it to God. No, not so, said the prophet. Tie thy camel and trust it to God. Do all you can for yourselves, and then trust in Providence, or luck, or whatever you please to call it, for the rest. Don't get above your business, young men, after they get through their business training, or apprenticeship, instead of pursuing their avocation and rising in, Lesson 26, 263, their business will often lie about doing nothing. They say, I have learned my business, but I am not going to be a hireling. What is the object of learning my trade or profession, unless I establish my heel? BU capital to start with. No, but I am going to have it. How are you going to get it? I will tell you confidentially. I have a wealthy old aunt, and she will die pretty soon, but if she does not, I expect to find some rich old man who will lend me a few thousand to give me a start. If I only get the money to start with, I will do well. There is no greater mistake than when a young man believes he will succeed with borrowed money. Why? Because every man's experience coincides with that of Mr. John Jacob Astor, who said it was more difficult for him to accumulate his first $1,000 than all the succeeding millions that made up his colossal fortune. Money is good for nothing unless you know the value of it by experience. Give a boy $20,000 and put him in business, and the chances are that he will lose every dollar of it before he is a year older. Like buying a ticket in the lottery and drawing a prize, it is easy come, easy go. He does not know the value of it. Nothing is worth anything unless it costs effort. Without self-denia and economy, patience and perseverance, and commencing with capital which you have not earned, you are not sure to succeed in accumulating. Young men, instead of waiting for dead men's shoes, should be up and doing, for there is no class of persons who are so unaccommodating in regard to dying as these rich old people, and it is fortunate for the expectantaires that it is so. 9 out of 10 of the rich men of our country today started out in life as poor boys, with determined wills, industry, perseverance, economy, and good habits. They went on gradually, made their own money, and saved it, and this is the best way to acquire a fortune. Stephen Girard started life as a poor cabin boy. Now he pays taxes on $1.5 million of income per year. John Jacob Astor was a poor farmer boy and died worth $20 million. Cornelius Vanderbilt began life rowing a boat from Staten Island to New York. Now he presents our government with a steamship worth $1 million, and he is worth $50 million. Do not scatter your powers, engage in one kind of business only, and stick to it faithfully until you succeed, or until your experience shows that you should abandon it. A constant hammering on one nail will generally drive 264. Semester 6, it home at last so that it can be clinched. When a man's undivided attention is centered on one object, his mind will constantly be suggesting improvements of value, which would escape him if his brain was occupied by a dozen different subjects at once. Many a fortune has slipped through a man's fingers because he was engaging into many occupations at a time. There is good sense in the old caution against having too many irons in the fire at once. Beware of outside operations. We sometimes see men who have obtained fortunes suddenly become poor. In many cases this arises from intemperance and often from gaming and other bad habits. Frequently it occurs because a man has been engaged in outside operations of some sort. When he gets rich in his legitimate business, he is told of a grand speculation where he can make a score of thousands. He is constantly flattered by his friends, who tell him that he is born lucky, that everything he touches turns into gold. Now if he forgets that his economical habits, his rectitude of conduct, and a personal attention to a business which he understood caused his success in life, he will listen to the siren voices. He says, I will put in $20,000. I have been lucky, and my good luck will soon bring me back $60,000. A few days elapse, and it is discovered he must put in $10,000 more soon after he is told it is all right. But certain matters not foreseen require an advance of $20,000 more, which will bring him a rich harvest. But before the time comes around to realize, the bubble bursts, he loses all he is possessed of, and then he learns what he ought to have known at the first, that however successful a man may be in his own business, if he turns from that and engages in a business which he doesn't understand, he is like Samson when shorn of his locks, his strength has departed, and he becomes like other men. If a man has plenty of money, he ought to invest something in everything that appears to promise success and that will probably benefit mankind, but let the sums thus invested be moderate in amount, and never let a man foolishly jeopardize a fortune that he has earned in a legitimate way by investing it in things in which he has had no experience. Don't blab. Some men have a foolish habit of telling their business. If they make money, they like to tell their neighbors how it scraps. Lesson 26, 265, was done. Nothing is gained by this, and ofttimes much is lost. Say nothing about your profits, your hopes, your expectations, your intentions. And this should apply to letters as well as to conversation. Goethe made Mephits Bowles saying, ever write a letter nor destroy one. Businessmen must write letters, but they should be careful what they put in them. If you are losing money, be specially cautious and not tell of it, or you will lose your reputation. Preserve your integrity. It is more precious than diamonds or rubies. The old miser said to his sons, get money, get it honestly if you can, but get money. This advice was not only atrociously wicked, but it was the very essence of stupidity. It was as much as to say, if you find it difficult to obtain money honestly, you can easily get it dishonestly. Get it in that way. Poor fool, not to know that the most difficult thing in life is to make money dishonestly, not to know that our prisons are full of men who attempted to follow this advice, not to understand that no man can be dishonest without soon being found out, and that when his lack of principle is discovered, nearly every avenue to success is closed against him forever. The public very properly shun all whose integrity is doubted. No matter how polite and pleasant and accommodating a man may be, none of us dare to deal with him if we suspect false weights and measures. Strict honesty not only lies at the foundation of all success in life financially, but in every other respect. Uncompromising integrity of character is invaluable. It secures to its possessor peace and joy which cannot be attained without it, which no amount of money or houses and lands can purchase. A man who is known to be strictly honest may be ever so poor, but he has the purses of all the community at his disposal, for all know that if he promises to return what he borrows, he will never disappoint them. As a mere matter of selfishness, therefore, if a man had no higher motive for being honest, all will find that the maxim of Dr. Franklin can never fail to be true, that honesty is the best policy. To get rich is not always equivalent to being successful. There are many rich poor men, while there are many others, honest and devout men and women, who have never possessed so much money as some rich persons squander in a week, but who are nevertheless really richer and happier than any man can ever be while he is a transgressor of the higher laws of his being. The inordinate love of money, no doubt, may be and is the root of all evil, but money itself, when properly used, is not only 266. Semester 6, a handy thing to have in the house, but affords the gratification of blessing our nice by enabling its possessor to enlarge the scope of human happiness and human influence. The desire for wealth is nearly universal, and none can say it is not laudable, provided the possessor of it accepts its responsibilities and uses it as a friend to humanity. The history of money-gating, which is commerce, is a history of civilization, and wherever trade has flourished most, there, too, have art and science produced the noblest fruits. In fact, as a general thing, money-getters are the benefactors of our race. To them, in a great measure, are we indebted for our institutions of learning and of art, our academies, colleges, and religious institutions. It is no argument against the desire for, or the possession of, wealth, to say that there are sometimes misers who hoard money, only for the sake of hoarding, and who have no higher aspiration than to grasp everything which comes within their reach. As we have sometimes hypocrites in religion, and demagogues in politics, so there are occasionally misers among money-getters. These, however, are only exceptions to the general rule. But when, in this country, we find such a nuisance and stumbling block as a miser, we remember with gratitude that in America we have no laws of primogeniture, and that, in the due course of nature, the time will come when the hoarded dust will be scattered for the benefit of humanity. To all men and women, therefore, do I conscientiously say, make money honestly, and not otherwise, for Shakespeare has truly said, he that wants money, means, and content, is without 3 good friends. What you are about to journ was worth 1. To Andrew Carnegie. Dr. Napoleon Hill, Lesson 27, How to Turn Your Desires into Gold. When Andrew Carnegie, founder of the iron and steel industry in the United States, was at the height of his power, he was interviewed by an earnest young man from a national business magazine. During that interview, Carnegie slyly dropped hints of a mysterious master power. He used a magic law of the Minda, little town psychological principle, which could accomplish great wonders. Napoleon Hill listened eagerly as Carnegie suggested that, upon that single principle, he could build the philosophy of all personal success, whether it be measured in terms of money, power, position, prestige, influence, or fame. What was Carnegie's secret? Napoleon Hill eventually issued it in a book that became the all-time best-selling book in the entire world on the subject of success, Think and Grow Rich. This lesson from that classic deals with the application of Carnegie's magic formula as it pertains to riches, although it will help you to achieve any goal providing your desire is strong enough. Andrew Carnegie was convinced that much of what is taught in schools is of no value in helping the individual to earn a living or accumulate wealth. He sincerely felt that if his formula could be taught in public schools and colleges, it would revolutionize the entire educational system. Unfortunately, his hope has never been realized, but we are proud to include his secret in the University of Success. Will it work for you? Only you can answer that. Remember, there are no limitations to your mind except those you acknowledge. 267, 268. Semester 6, when Edwin C. Barnes climbed down from the freight train in East Orange, N.J. More than 50 years ago, he may have resembled a tramp, but his thoughts were those of a king. As he made his way from the railroad tracks to Thomas Edison's office, his mind was at work. He saw himself standing in Edison's presence. He heard himself asking Mr. Edison for an opportunity to carry out the one consuming obsession of his life, a burning desire to become the business associate of the great Mentiver. Barnes' desire was not a hope. It was not a wish. It was a keen desire which transcended everything else. It was definite. A few years later, Edwin C. Barnes again stood before Edison in the same office where he first met the inventor. This time his desire had been translated into reality. He was in business with Edison. The dominating dream of his life had become a reality. Barnes succeeded because he chose a definite goal and placed all his energy, all his willpower, all his effort, everything, back of that goal. No way to retreat. 5 years passed before the chance he had been seeking made its appearance. To everyone except himself, he appeared only another cog in the Edison business wheel, but in his own mind he was the partner of Edison every minute of the time, forth very day that he first went to work there. It is a remarkable illustration of the power of a definite desire. Barnes won his goal because he wanted to be a business associate of Mr. Edison more than he wanted anything else. He created a plan by which to attain that purpose, but he burned all bridges behind him. He stood by his desire until it became the dominating obsession of his life into silly a fact. When he went to East Orange, he did not say to himself, I will try to induce Edison to give me a job of some sort. He said, I will see Edison and put him on notice that one have come to go into business with him. He did not say, I will keep my eyes open for another opportunity in case one fail to get what I want in the Edison organization. He said, there is but one thing in this world that one, lesson 27, 269, am determined to have, and that is a business association with Thomas Edison. I will bum all bridges behind me and stake my entire future on my ability to get what I want. He left himself no possible way of retreat. He had to win or perish. That is all there is to the Barnes story of success. He burned his boats a long while ago, a great warrior met a situation which made it necessary for him to make a decision, which ensured his success on the battlefield. He was about to send his armies against a powerful foe, whose men outnumbered his own. He loaded his soldiers into boats, sailed to the enemy's country, unloaded soldiers and equipment, then gave the order to bum the ships that had carried them. Addressing his men before the first battle, he said, You see the boats going up in smoke. That means that we cannot leave these shores alive unless we win. We now have no choice where wine or we perish. They won. Every person who wins in any undertaking must be willing to bum his ships and cut all sources of retreat. Only by so doing can one be sure of maintaining that state of mind known as a burning desire to win, essential to success. The morning after the Great Chicago Fire, a group of merchants stood on State Street, looking at the smoking remains of what had been their stores. They went into a conference to decide if they would try to rebuild or leave Chicago and start over in a more promising section of the country. They reached a decisional except Onito leave Chicago. The merchant who decided to stay and rebuild pointed a finger at the remains of his store and said, Gentlemen, on that very spot I will build the world's greatest store, no matter how many times it may bum down. That was almost a century ago. The store was built. It stands there today, a towering monument to the power of that state of mind known as a burning desire. The easy thing for Marshall Field to have done would have been exactly what his fellow merchants did. When the going was hard and the future looked dismal, they pulled up and went where the going seemed easier. Mark well this difference between Marshall Field and the other merchants, because it is the same difference which distinguishes practically all who succeed from those who fail. Every human being who reaches the age of understanding of 27. Semester 6, the purpose of money wishes for it. Wishing will not bring riches, but desiring riches with a state of mind that becomes an obsession, then planning definite ways and means to acquire riches, and backing those plans with persistence which does not recognize failure, will bring riches. 6 steps that turn desires into gold. The method by which desire for riches can be transmuted into its financial equivalent consists of the following 6 definite, practical steps. 1. Fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. It is not sufficient merely to say I want plenty of money. Be definite as to the amount. 2. Determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money you desire. There is no such reality as something for nothing. 3. Establish a definite date when you intend to possess the money you desire. 4. Create a definite plan for carrying out your desire, and begin at once, whether you are ready or not, to put this plan into action. 5. Write out a clear, concise statement of the amount of money you intend to acquire. Name the time limit for its acquisition, state what you intend to give in return for the money, and describe clearly the plan through which you intend to accumulate it. 6. Read your written statement aloud twice daily, once just before retiring at night, and once after arising in the morning. As you read, see and feel and believe yourself already in possession of the money. It is important that you follow the instructions described in these 6 steps. It is especially important that you observe and follow the instructions in the 6th paragraph. You may complain that it is impossible for you to see yourself in possession of money before you actually have it. Here is where a burning desire will come to your aid. If you truly desire money so keenly that your desire is an obsession, you will have no difficulty in convincing yourself that you will acquire it. The object is to want money, and to become so determined to have it that you convince yourself you will have it. Lesson 27, 271, Principles Worth 1. To the uninitiated, who have not been schooled in the working principles of the human mind, these instructions may appear impractical. It may be helpful, O all who fail to recognize the soundness of the 6 steps, to know that the information they convey was received from Andrew Carnegie, who began as an ordinary laborer in the steel mills, but managed, despite his humble beginning, to make these principles yield him a fortune of considerably more than $100 million. It may be of further help to know that the 6 steps here recommended were carefully scrutinized by Thomas Edison, who placed his stamp of approval upon them as being not only the steps essential for the accumulation of money, but for the attainment of any goal. The steps call for no hard labor. They call for no sacrifice. They do not require one to become ridiculous or credulous. 2. Apply them calls for no great amount of education. But the suspectionally of these 6 steps does call for sufficient imagination to enable one to see and to understand that accumulation of money cannot be left to chance, good fortune, and luck. One must realize that all who have accumulated great fortunes first did a certain amount of dreaming, hoping, wishing, desiring, and planning before they acquired money. You may as well know right here that you can never have riches in great quantities unless you can work yourself into a white heat of desire for money, and actually believe you will possess it. Great dreams can turn into riches. We who are in this race for riches should be encouraged to know that this changed world in which we live is demanding new ideas, new ways of doing things, new leaders, new inventions, new methods of teaching, new methods of marketing, new books, new literature, new features for television, new ideas for moving pictures. Back of all this demand for new and better things, there is one quality which one must possess to win, and that is definiteness of purpose, the knowledge of what one wants, and a burning desire to possess it. We who desire to accumulate riches should remember the real leaders of the world always have been men who harnessed and put into practical use the intangible, unseen forces of unborn opportunity, and have converted those forces or impulses of thought, 272. Semester 6, into skyscrapers, cities, factories, airplanes, automobiles, and every form of convenience that makes life more pleasant. In planning to acquire your share of the riches, let no one influence you to scorn the dreamer. To win the big stakes in this changed world, you must catch the spirit of the great pioneers of the past, whose dreams have given to civilization all that it has of value, the spirit which serves as the lifeblood of our own country or opportunity and mine, to develop and market our talents. The thing you wish to do is right, and you believe in it. Go ahead and do it. Put your dream across, and never mind what they say if you meet with temporary defeat, for they perhaps do not know that every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent success. The Wright brothers dreamed of a machine that would fly through the air. Now one may see evidence all over the world that they dreamed soundly. Marconi dreamed of a system for harnessing the intangible forces of the ether. Evidence that he did not dream in vain may be found in every radio and television set in the world. It may interest you to know that Marconi's friends had him taken into custody and examined in a psychopathic hospital when he announced he had discovered a principle through which he could send messages through the air without the aid of wires or other direct, physical means of communication. The dreamers of today fare better. The world is filled with an abundance of opportunity which the dreamers of the past never knew. They put desire behind their dreams. A burning desire to be and to do is the starting point from which the dreamer must take off. Dreams are not born of indifference, laziness, or lack of ambition. Remember that almost all who succeed in life get off to a bad start and pass through many heartbreaking struggles before they arrive. The turning point in the lives of those who succeed usually comes at the moment of some crisis through which they are introduced to their other selves. John Bunyan wrote Pilgrim's Progress, which is among the finest of all English books, after he had been confined in prison and sorely punished because of his views on the subject of religion. Henry discovered the genius which slept within his brain after he had met with great misfortune and was confined in a prison cell in Columbus, Ohio. Being forced, through misfortune, Lesson 27, 273, to become acquainted with his other self and to use his imagination, he discovered himself to be a great author instead of a miserable criminal and outcast. Charles Dickens began by pasting labels on blacking pots. The tragedy of his first love penetrated the depths of his soul and converted him into one of the world's truly great authors. That tragedy produced first David Copperfield, then a succession of other works that made this a richer and better world for all who read his books. Helen Keller became deaf, dumb, and blind shortly after birth. Despite her greatest misfortune, she has written her name indelibly in the pages of the history of the great. Her entire life has served as evidence that no one is ever defeated until defeat has been accepted as a reality. Robert Bums was an illiterate country lad. He was cursed by poverty and grew up to be a drunkard in the bargain. The world was made better for his having lived because he clothed beautiful thoughts in poetry, and thereby plucked a thorn and planted a rose in its place. Beethoven was deaf, Milton was blind, but their names will last as long as time endures because they dreamed and translated their dreams into organized thought. There is a difference between wishing for a thing and being ready to receive it. No one is ready for a thing until he believes he can acquire it. The state of mind must be belief, not mere hope or wish. Opendum andis is essential for belief. Closed minds do not inspire faith, courage, or belief. Remember, no more effort is required to aim high in life, to demand abundance and prosperity, than is required to accept misery and poverty. A great poet has correctly stated this universal truth through these lines: I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more, however I begged at evening, when I counted my scanty store. For life is a just employer, he gives you what you ask, but once you have set the wages, why, you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn, dismayed, that any wage I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid. 274. Semester 6, Desire performs the impossible as a fitting climax. I wish to introduce one of the most unusual persons I have ever known. I first saw him a few minutes after he was born. He came into the world without any physical sign of ears, and the doctor admitted, when pressed for an opinion on the case, that the child might be deaf and mute for life. I challenged the doctor's opinion. I had the right to do so. I was the child's father. I too reached a decision and rendered an opinion, but I expressed the opinion silently, in the secrecy of my own heart. In my own mind I knew that my son would hear and speak. How? I was sure there must be a way, and I knew I would find it. I thought of the words of the immortal Emerson: the whole course of things goes to teach us faith. We need only obey. There is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening, we shall hear the right word. The right word, desire more than anything else. I desired that my son should not be a deaf-mute. From that desire I never receded, not for a second. What could I do about it? Somehow I would find a way to transplant into that child's mind my own burning desire for ways and means of conveying sound to his brain without the aid of ears. As soon as the child was old enough to cooperate, I would fill his mind so completely with a burning desire to hear that nature would, by methods of her own, translate it into physical reality. All this thinking took place in my own mind, but I spoke of it to no one. Every day I renewed the pledge I had made to myself, that my son should not be a deaf-mute. As he grew older and began to take notice of things around him, we observed that he had a slight degree of hearing. When he reached the age when children usually begin talking, he made no attempt to speak, but we could tell by his actions that he could hear certain sounds slightly. That was all I wanted to know. I was convinced that if he could hear, even slightly, he might develop still greater hearing capacity. Then something happened which gave me hope. It came from an entirely unexpected source. We find a way. We bought a phonograph. When the child heard the music, for the first time he went into ecstasies and promptly appropriated the machine. On one occasion, he paged a record over and over for Lesson 27. 275. Almost 2 hours, standing in front of the phonograph with his teeth clamped on the edge of the case. The significance of this self and habit of his did not become clear to us until years afterward, for we had not heard of the principle of bone conduction of sound at that time. Shortly after he appropriated the phonograph, I discovered that he could hear me quite clearly when I spoke with my lips touching his masted bone at the base of the skull. Having determined that he could hear the sound of my voice plainly, I began immediately to transfer to his mind the desire to hear and speak. I soon discovered that the child enjoyed bedtime stories, so I went to work creating stories designed to develop in him self-retion, imagination, and a keen desire to hear and to be normal. There was one story in particular which I emphasized by giving it some new and dramatic coloring each time it was told. It was designed to plant in his mind the thought that his affliction was not a liability, but an asset of great value. Despite the fact that All the philosophy I had examined clearly indicated that every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. I must confess that I had not the slightest idea how this affliction could ever become an asset. Nothing could stop him. As I analyzed the experience in retrospect, I can see now that my son's faith in me had much to do with the astounding results. He did not question anything I told him. I sold him the idea that he had a distinct advantage over his older brother, and that this advantage would reflect itself in many ways. For example, the teachers in school would observe that he had no ears, and because of this, they would show him special attention and treat him with extraordinary kindness. They always did. I sold him the idea, too, that when he became old enough to sell newspapers, his older brother had already become a newspaper merchant. He would have a big advantage over his brother for the reason that people would pay him extra money for his wares because they could see that he was a bright, industrious boy, despite the fact he had no ears. When he was about 7, he showed the first evidence that our method of programming his mind was bearing fruit. For several months he begged for the privilege of selling newspapers, but his mother would not give the project her consent. Finally, he took matters in his own hands. One afternoon, when he was left at home with the servants, he climbed through 276. Semester 6, the kitchen window, shinnied to the ground, and set out on his own. He borrowed 6 cents in capital from the neighborhood shoemaker, invested it in papers, sold out, reinvested, and kept repeating until late in the evening. After balancing his accounts and paying back the 6 cents he had borrowed from his banker, he had a net profit of 42 cents. When we got home that night, we found him in bed asleep, with the money tightly clenched in his hand. His mother opened his hand, removed the coins, and cried. Of all things, crying over her son's first victory seemed so inappropriate. My reaction was the reverse. I laughed heartily, for I knew that my endeavor to plant in the child's mind an attitude of faith in himself had been successful. His mother saw in his first business venture a little deaf boy who had gone out in the streets and risked his life to earn money. I saw a brave, ambitious, self-reliant little businessman whose stock in himself had been increased 100% because he had gone into business on his own initiative and had won. The transaction pleased me because I knew that he had given evidence of resourcefulness that would go with him all through life. A breakthrough in hearing, the little deaf boy went through the grades, high school, and college without being able to hear his teachers except when they shouted loudly at close range. He did not go to a school for the deaf. We would not permit him to learn the sign language. We were determined that he should live a normal life and associate with normal children, and we stood by that decision, although it cost us many heated debates with school officials. While he was in high school, he tried an electrical hearing aid, but it was of no value to him. During his last week in college, something happened which marked the most important turning point of his life. Through what seemed to be mere chance, he came into possession of another electrical hearing device, which was sent to him on trial. He was slow about testing it, due to his disappointment with a similar device. Finally, he picked up the instrument and more or less carelessly placed it on his head, hooked up the battery, and lo, as if by a stroke of magic, his lifelong desire for normal hearing became a reality. For the first time in his life, he heard practically, as well as any person with normal hearing. Lesson 27, 277. Overjoyed because of the changed world which had been brought to him through his hearing device, he rushed to the telephone, called his mother, and heard her voice perfectly. The next day, he plainly heard the voices of his professors in class for the first time in his life. For the first time in his life, he could converse freely with other people without the necessity of their having to speak loudly. Truly, he had come into possession of a changed world. Desire had commenced to pay dividends, but the victory was not yet complete. The boy still had to find a definite and practical way to convert his handicap into an equivalent asset. The deaf boy helps others, hardly realizing the significance of what had already been accomplished, but intoxicated with the joy of his newly discovered world of sound, he wrote a letter to the manufacturer of the hearing aid enthusiastically describing his experience. Something in his letter caused the company to invite him to New York. When he arrived, he was escorted through the factory, and while talking with the chief engineer, telling him about his changed world, a hunch, an idea, or an inspirational at what you wish placed into his mind. It was this impulse of thought which converted his affliction into an asset destined to pay dividends in both money and happiness to thousands for all time to come. The sum and substance of that impulse of thought was this: it occurred to him that he might be of help to the millions of deaf and people who go through life without the benefit of hearing devices if he could find a way to tell them the story of his changed world. For an entire month he carried on an intensive research, during which he analyzed the entire marketing system of the manufacturer of the hearing device, and created ways and means of communicating with the hard of hearing all over the world for the purpose of sharing with them his newly discovered changed world. When this was done, he put in writing a tweet or a plan, bas, ed upon his findings. When he presented the plan to the company, he was instantly given a position for the purpose of carrying out his ambition. Little did he dream, when he went to work, that he was destined to bring hope and practical relief to thousands of deaf and people who, without his help, would have been doomed forever to deafness. 278, Semester 6. There is no doubt in my mind that Blair would have been a deaf mute all his life if his mother and I had not managed to shape his mind as we did. When I planted in his mind the desire to hear and talk and live as a normal person, there went with that impulse some strange influence which caused nature to become bridge builder and span the gulf of silence between his brain and the outer world. Truly, a burning desire has devious ways of transmuting itself into its physical equivalent. Blair desired normal hearing, now he has it. He was born with a handicap which might easily have sent one with a less defined desire to the street with a bundle of pencils and a tin cup. The little white lie I planted in his mind when he was a child, by leading him to believe his affliction would become a great asset, has justified itself. Verily there is nothing right or wrong which belief, plus burning desire, cannot make real. These qualities are free to everyone. Desire works magic for a singer. One short paragraph in a news dispatch concerning Madame Ernestine Schumann gives the clue to this unusual woman's stupendous success as a singer. I quote the paragraph because the clue it contains is none other than desire. Early in her career, Madame Schumann visited the director of the Vienna Court Opera to have him test her voice, but he did not test it. After taking one look at the awkward and poorly dressed girl, he exclaimed, none too gently, with such a face and with no personality at all, "How can you ever expect to succeed in opera? My good child, give up the idea. Buy a sewing machine and go to work. You can never be a singer." Never is a long time. The director of the Vienna Court Opera knew much about the technique of singing. He knew little about the power of desire when it assumes the proportion of an obsession. He had known more of that power, he would not have made the mistake of condemning genius without giving it an opportunity. Several years ago, one of my business associates became ill. He became worse as time went on, and finally was taken to the hospital for an operation. The doctor warned me that there was little if any chance of my ever seeing him alive again. But that was the doctor's opinion. It was not the opinion of the patient. Just, Lesson 27, 279, before he was wheeled away, he whispered feebly, "Do not be disturbed, Chief. I will be out of here in a few days." The attending nurse looked at me with pity. But the patient did come through safely. After it was over, his physician said, nothing but his own desire to live saved him. He never would have pulled through if he had not refused to accept the possibility of death. I believe in the power of desire backed by faith because I have seen this power lift men from lowly beginnings to places of power and wealth. I have seen it rob the grave of its victims. I have seen it serve as the medium by which men staged a comeback after having been defeated in 100 different ways. I have seen it provide my own son with a normal, happy, successful life, despite nature's having sent him into the world without ears. Through some strange and powerful principle of mental chemistry which she has never divulged, nature wraps up in the impulse of strong desire that something which recognizes no such word as impossible and accepts no such reality as failure. It is true that money cannot buy happiness, but it does make it possible for you to enjoy the best that the world has to offer. George S. Osen, Lesson 28, How to Build Your Financial Nest Egg. Settle back and relax. You are about to learn in an unique way the most effective method for accumulating wealth that has ever been devised. Keep that pen or pencil in hand, however, because there is much you will want to remember from your encounter with the richest man in Babylon. For many years, George S. Clason was the creator of short stories which he called Babylonian parables. In them he described the success secrets of the ancients and how they handled their finances. These stories were printed at first in small booklets, which were distributed free to their clients by banks, insurance companies, and investment houses. Eventually they became so popular that Mr. Klassen published a collection of his favorite pieces in a book titled The Richest Man in Babylon, named after his most famous parable. The book has been acclaimed as the greatest of all inspirational works on the subject of thrift and financial planning. Mr. Klassen's premise was that money is governed today by the same laws which controlled it when prosperous Demuis thronged the streets of Babylon 6,000 years ago. Babylon, he claimed, became the wealthiest city of the ancient world because its citizens were the richest people of their time. They appreciated the value of money. They practiced sound financial principles in acquiring money, keeping money, and making their money earn more money. They provided for themselves what we all desire: incomes for the future. 281, 282, Semester 6. This lesson is the complete text of Mr. Klassen's most famous story, The Richest Man in Babylon. It can point you to a way of life that may have seemed beyond your reach. In old Babylon there once lived a certain very rich man named Arcade. Far and wide he was famed for his great wealth. Also was he famed for his liberality. He was generous in his charities. He was generous with his family. He was liberal in his own expenses. But nevertheless each year his wealth increased more rapidly than he spent it. And there were certain friends of younger days who came to him and said, "You, Arcade, are more fortunate than we. You have become the richest man in all Babylon while we struggle for existence. You can wear the finest garments and you can enjoy the rarest foods, while we must be content if we can clothe our families in raiment that is presentable and feed them as best we can. Yes, once we were equal. We studied under the same master. We played in the same games. And in neither the studies nor the games did you outshine us. And in the years since you have been no more an honorable citizen than we. Nor have you worked harder or more faithfully, insofar as we can judge. Why, then, should a fickle fate single you out to enjoy all the good things of life and ignore us who are equally deserving?" Thereupon Arcade remonstrated with them, saying, "You have not acquired more than a bare existence in the years since we were youths. It is because you either have failed to learn the laws that govern the building of wealth, or else you do not observe them. Fickle fate is a vicious goddess who brings no permanent good to anyone. On the contrary, she brings ruin to almost every man upon whom she showers unearned gold. She makes wanton spenders who soon dissipate all they receive and are left beset by overwhelming appetites and desires they have not the ability to gratify. Yet others whom she favors become misers and hoard their wealth, fearing to spend what they have, knowing they do not possess the ability to replace it. They further are beset by fear of Lesson 28, 283, robbers, and doom themselves to lives of emptiness and secret misery. Others there probably are, who can take an earned gold and add to it, and continue to be happy and contented citizens. But so few are they, I know of them but by hearsay. Think you of the men who have inherited sudden wealth, and see if these things are not so." His friends admitted that of the men they knew who had inherited wealth these words were true, and they besought him to explain to them how he had become possessed of so much property. So he continued, "In my youth I looked about me and saw all the good things there were to bring happiness and contentment, and I realized that wealth increased the potency of all these. Wealth is a power. With wealth many things are possible. One may ornament the home with the richest of furnishings. One may sail the distant seas. One may feast on the delicacies of far lands. One may buy the ornaments of the gold worker and the stone polisher. One may even build mighty temples for the gods. One may do all these things and many others in which there is delight for the senses and gratification for the soul. And when I realized all this, I declared to myself that I would claim my share of the good things of life. I would not be one of those who stand afar off, enviously watching others enjoy. I would not be content to clothe myself in the cheapest raiment that looked respectable. I would not be satisfied with the lot of a poor man. On the contrary, I would make myself a guest at this banquet of good things. Being, as you know, the son of a humble merchant, one of a large family with no hope of an inheritance, and not being endowed, as you have so frankly said, with superior powers or wisdom, I decided that if I was to achieve what I desired, time and study would be required. As for time, all men have it in abundance. You, each of you, have let slip by sufficient time to have made yourselves wealthy. Yet, you admit, you have nothing to show except your good families, of which you can be justly proud. As for study, did not our wise teacher teach us that learning was of two kinds, the one kind being the things we learned, and 284. Semester 6, new, and the other being in the training that taught us how to find out what we did not know. Therefore did one decide to find out how one might accumulate wealth, and when one had found out, to make this might ask and do it well. For, is it not wise that we should enjoy while we dwell in the brightness of the sunshine, for sorrows enough shall descend upon us when we depart for the darkness of the world of spirit? I found employment as a scribe in the hall of records, and long hours each day one labored upon the clay tablets. Week after week, and month after month, one labored, yet from my earnings one had now to show food and clothing and penance to the gods, and other things of which I could remember not what, absorbed all my earnings. But my determination did not leave me, and one day Algamish, the money-lender, came to the house of the city master and ordered a copy of the 9th law, and he said to me, I must have this in 2 days, and if the task is done by that time, 2 coppers will I give to thee. So I labored hard, but the law was long, and when Algamish returned the task was unfinished. He was angry, and had I been his slave he would have beaten me. But knowing the city master would not permit him to injure me, I was unafraid, so one said to him, Algamish, you are a very rich man. Tell me how one may also become rich, and all night I will carve upon the clay, and when the sun rises it shall be completed. He smiled at me and replied, You are a forward knave, but we will call it a bargain. All that night I carved, though my back pained, and the smell of the wick made my head ache until my eyes could hardly see. But when he returned at sunup, the tablets were complete. Now, I said, tell me what you promised. You have fulfilled your part of our bargain, my son, he said to me kindly, and I am ready to fulfill mine. One will tell you these things you wish to know because one am becoming an old man, and an old tongue loves to wag. And when youth comes to age, for advice he receives the wisdom of years. But too often does youth think that age knows only the wisdom of days that are gone, and therefore profits not. But remember this, the sun that shines today is the sun that shone when thy father was born, and will still be shining when thy last grandchild shall pass into the darkness. The thoughts of youth, he continued, are bright lights that shine forth like the meteors that oft make brilliant the sky, but the wisdom of age is like the fixed stars that shine so unchanged that the sailor may depend upon them to steer his course. Mark you well my words, for if you do not you will fail to. Lesson 28, 285. Grasp the truth that I will tell you, and you will think that your night's work has been in vain. Then he looked at me shrewdly from under his shaggy brows and said in a low, forceful tone, I found the road to wealth when I decided that a part of all I earned was mine to keep, and so will you. Then he continued to look at me with a glance that I could feel pierce me, but said no more. Is that all? I asked. That was sufficient to change the heart of a sheepherder into the heart of a moneylender, he replied. But all iron is mine to keep, is it not? I demanded. Far from it, he replied. Do you not pay the garment-taker? Do you not pay the sandal-maker? Do you not pay for the things you eat? Can you live in Babylon without spending? What have you to show for your earnings of the past month? What for the past year? Fool, you pay to everyone but yourself. Dullard, you labor for others. As well be a slave and work for what your master gives you to eat and wear. If you did keep for yourself 1/10 of all you earn, how much would you have in 10 years? My knowledge of the numbers did not forsake me, and I answered, as much as I earned in 1 year. You speak but half the truth, he retorted. Every gold piece you save is a slave to work for you. Every copper it earns is its child that also can earn for you. If you would become wealthy, then what you save must turn, and its children must turn, that all may help to give to you the abundance you crave. You think I cheat you for your long night's work, he continued, but I am paying you 1,000 times over if you have the intelligence to grasp the truth I offer you. A part of all you earn is yours to keep. It should be not less than 1/10, no matter how little you earn. It can be as much more as you can afford. Pay yourself first. Do not buy from the clothing-scare and the sandal-maker more than you can pay out of the rest, and still have enough for food and charity and penance to the gods. Wealth, like a tree, grows from a teeny seed. The first copper you save is the seed from which your tree of wealth shall grow. The sooner you plant that seed, the sooner shall the tree grow. And the more faithfully you nourish and water that tree with consistent savings, the sooner may you bask in contentment beneath its shade. So saying, he took his tablets and went away. I thought much about what he had said to me, and it seemed reasonable. So I decided that I would try it. Each time 286. Semester 6 was paid one, took one from each 10 pieces of copper and hid it away. And strange as it may seem, one was no shorter of funds than before. One noticed little difference as one managed to get along without it. But often one was tempted, as my hoard began to grow, to spend it for some of the good things the merchants displayed, brought by camels and ships from the land of the Phoenicians. But one wisely refrained. A 12th month after Algamish had gone, he again returned, and said to me, "Son, have you paid to yourself not less than 1/10 of all you have earned for the past year?" I answered proudly, "Yes, master, 1/2. "That is good," he answered, beaming upon me. "And what have you done with it?" "I have given it to Esmber, the brickmaker, who told me he was traveling over the far seas, and in Tyre he would buy for me the rare jewels of the Phoenicians. When he returns we shall sell these at high prices, and divide the earnings." "Every fool must learn," he growled, "but why trust the knowledge of a brickmaker about jewels? Would you go to the breadmaker to inquire about the stars? No, by my tunic, you would go to the astrologer if you had power to think. Your savings are gone. Youth, you have jerked your wealth right up by the roots. But plant another. Try again. And next time, if you would have advice about jewels, go to the jewel merchant. You would know the truth about sheep, go to the herdsman. Advice is one thing that is freely given away, but watch that you take only what is worth having. He who takes advice about his savings from one who is inexperienced in such matters shall pay with his savings for proving the falsity of their opinions." Saying this, he went away. And it was as he said, for the Phoenicians are scoundrels, and sold to Esmber worthless bits of glass that looked like gems. But as Algamish had bid me, one again saved each 10th copper, for one now had formed the habit, and it was no longer difficult. Again, 12 months later, Algamish came to the room of the scribes and addressed me. "What progress have you made since last one saw you?" "I have paid myself faithfully," one replied, "and my savings, one, have entrusted to Agar the shield maker, to buy bronze, and each 4th month he does pay me the rental." "That is good. And what do you do with the rental?" "I do have a great feast with honey and fine wine and spiced cake. Also I have bought me a scarlet tunic. And some day one shall buy me a young ass upon which to ride." To which Algamish laughed, "You do eat the children of" Lesson 28. 287. Your savings. Then how do you expect them to work for you? And how can they have children who will also work for you? First get thee an army of golden slaves, and then many a rich banquet may you enjoy without regret. So saying, he again went away. Nor did I again see him for 2 years, when he once more returned, and his face was full of deep lines, and his eyes drooped, for he was becoming a very old man. And he said to me, "Arcad, hast thou yet achieved the wealth thou dreamed of?" And I answered, "Not yet all that I desire, but some I have, and it earns more, and its earnings earn more." "And do you still take the advice of brickmakers?" "About brickmaking they give good advice," I retorted. "Arcad," he continued, "you have learned your lessons well. You first learned to live upon less than you could earn. Next you learned to seek advice from those who were competent through their own experiences to give it. And lastly, you have learned to make gold work for you. You have taught yourself how to acquire money, how to keep it, and how to use it. Therefore you are competent for a responsible position. I am becoming an old man. My sons think only of spending and give no thought to earning. My interests are great, and I fear too much for me to look after. If you will go to Nipper and look after my lands there, I shall make you my partner, and you shall share in my estate." So I went to Nipper and took charge of his holdings, which were large. And because I was full of ambition, and because I had mastered the 3 laws of successfully handling wealth, I was enabled to increase greatly the value of his properties. So I prospered much, and when the spirit of Algamish departed for the sphere of darkness, I did share in his estate as he had arranged under the law. So spake Arcad, and when he had finished his tale, one of his friends said, "You were indeed fortunate that Algamish made of you an heir. Fortunate only in that I had the desire to prosper before I first met him. For 4 years did I not prove my definiteness of purpose by keeping 1/10 of all I earned. Would you call a fisherman lucky who 4 years so studied the habits of the fish that, with each changing wind, he could cast his nets about them? Opportunity is a haughty goddess who wastes no time with those who are unprepared. You had strong willpower to keep on after you lost your first year's savings. You are unusual in that way," spoke up another. "Willpower," retorted Arcad. "What nonsense! Do you think?" 288. Semester 6 Willpower gives a man the strength to lift a burden the camel cannot carry, or to draw a load the oxen cannot budge. Willpower is but the unflinching purpose to carry a task you set for yourself to fulfillment. If I set for myself a task, be it ever so trifling, I shall see it through. How else shall I have confidence in myself to do important things? Should I say to myself, for 100 days as I walk across the bridge into the city, I will pick from the road a pebble and cast it into the stream, I would do it. If on the 7th day I passed by without remembering, I would not say to myself, tomorrow I will cast 2 pebbles which will do as well. Instead, I would retrace my steps and cast the pebble. Nor on the 20th day would I say to myself, Arcade, this is useless. What does it avail you to cast a pebble every day? Throw in a handful and be done with it. No, I would not say that nor do it. When I set a task for myself, I complete it. Therefore I am careful not to start difficult and impractical tasks because I love leisure. And then another friend spoke up and said, if what you tell is true, and it does seem as you have said, reasonable, then being so simple, if all men did it, there would not be enough wealth to go around. Wealth grows wherever men exert energy, Arcade replied. If a rich man builds him a new palace, is the gold he pays out gone? No, the brickmaker has part of it, and the laborer has part of it, and the artist has part of it, and everyone who labors upon the house each part of it. Yet when the palace is completed, is it not worth all it cost? And is the ground upon which it stands not worth more because it is there? And is the ground that adjoins it not worth more because it is there? Wealth grows in magic ways. No man can prophesy the limit of it. Have not the Phoenicians built great cities on barren coasts with the wealth that comes from their ships of commerce on the seas? What then do you advise us to do that we also may become rich? Asked still another of his friends. The years have passed, and we are no longer young men, and we have nothing put by. I advise that you take the wisdom of Algamish and say to yourselves, a part of all iron is mine to keep. Say it in the morning when you first arise. Say it at noon. Say it at night. Say it each hour of every day. Say it to yourself until the words stand out like letters of fire across the sky. Impress yourself with the idea. Fill yourself with the thought. Then take whatever portion seems wise. Let it be not less than 1/10 and lay it by. Arrange your other expenditures to do this if necessary, but lay by that portion first. Soon you will realize what, Lesson 28, 289, a rich feeling it is to own a treasure upon which you alone have claim. As it grows, it will stimulate you. A new joy of life will thrill you. Greater efforts will come to you to earn more. For of your increased earnings, will not the same percentage be also yours to keep? Then learn to make your treasure work for you. Make it your slave. Make its children and its children's children work for you. Ensure an income for thy future. Look thou at the aged, and forget not that in the days to come thou also will be numbered among them. Therefore invest thy treasure with greatest caution, that it be not lost. Usurious rates of return are deceitful sirens that sing but to lure the unwary upon the rocks of loss and remorse. Provide also that thy family may not want should the gods call thee to their realms. For such protection, it is always possible to make provision with small payments at regular intervals. Therefore the provident man delays not in expectation of a large sum becoming available for such a wise purpose. Counsel with wise men. Seek the advice of men whose daily work is handling money. Let them save you from such an error as I myself made in entrusting my money to the judgment of Azumber, the brickmaker. A small return and a safe one is far more desirable than risk. Enjoy life while you are here. Do not overstrain or try to save too much. If 1/10 of all you earn is as much as you can comfortably keep, be content to keep this portion. Live otherwise according to your income, and let not yourself get niggardly and afraid to spend. Life is good, and life is rich with things worth while and things to enjoy. His friends thanked him and went away. Some were silent, because they had no imagination and could not understand. Some were sarcastic because they thought that one so rich should divide with old friends not so fortunate. But some had in their eyes a new light. They realized that Algamish had come back each time to the room of the scribes because he was watching a man work his way out of darkness into light. When that man had found the light, a place awaited him. No one could fill that place until he had for himself worked out his own understanding, until he was ready for opportunity. These latter were the ones who, in the following years, frequently revisited Arcade, who received them gladly. He counseled with them, and gave them freely of his wisdom, as men of broad experience are always glad to do. and he assisted them in so. 29. Semester 6, investing their savings that it would bring in a good interest with safety, and would neither belliced nor entangled in investments that paid no dividends. The turning point in these men's lives came upon that day, when they realized the truth that had come from Algamish to Arcad and from Arcad to them. A part of Il Yearn is yours to keep. 3 short rules that can help you to become as great as you want to be. Cavett Robert, Lesson 29, How to Attract Success. In the past 20 lessons you have already been supplied with more in-depth information on self-esteem than the average individual receives in a lifetime. But these lessons are only rungs on your newly built ladder of success. You, and only you, can accomplish each step upward through patience, desire, courage, and hard work. Austin to America's supreme motivational speaker, Cavett Robert. We've heard the expression climbing the ladder of success so often that its significance is lost in its simplicity. We know that a ladder is nothing but a tooljuice, an instrument to use in order to arrive at some destination. Yukasway, a job is just a tool to be used in arriving at our goals in life. Let's consider the reason that a ladder is so symbolic. First, a ladder is designed for vertical and not horizontal use. It is to be used only for an upward climb. Also, a ladder cannot be climbed except by using one rung at a time. Just as people do not explode into success but grow into it, a ladder offers only a progressive means of travel. We use each rung as a foundation to reach greater heights. If we try to skip a rung, disaster is imminent. Perhaps the most important similarity between one's job and a ladder is that it requires effort to climb in either case. Not all people are willing to make the sacrifice and effort to reach the top of the ladder, but I can't conceive of anyone having so little ambition that he or she doesn't want to go up far enough to escape the congestion at the bottom. 291, 292, Semester 6, from his widely read book, Success with People Through Human Engineering and Motivation. Mr. Robert will teach you what you need to do in order to handle yourself with pride on your new ladder. Back in 1935, I had a privilege I shall always cherish. I was invited to a luncheon as a guest. To my amazement and delight, Will Rogers was the speaker. This was one of the last speeches Will Rogers ever made, because a few weeks later he and Wiley Post started their flight around the world. We all know the tragic death they met in Alaska. Now, Mr. Sogers did not have the scholarly flavor or the academic taste that one might expect from some of the economic prognosatics of his day. But in a few words he gave some of the most profound advice I have ever heard. I've read many books on success. I've heard dozens upon dozens of records on this same subject. But I don't believe there is a surer formula or a more certain blueprint leading to success, if followed conscientiously, than this one. If you want to be successful, he said, it's just this simple. Know what you are doing, love what you are doing, and believe in what you are doing. Yes, he said, it's just that simple. Now let's look into this advice a little more closely. Know what you are doing. First, know what you are doing. There is no substitute for knowledge. In our approach to knowledge, we must realize that preparation is a constant process with no ending. It must be forever moving, never static. School is never out for a person who really wants to succeed. There is no saturation point. All economic research centers agree that because of the rapidly changing phases of our economy, the average person in any line of endeavor today, Lesson 29, 293, regardless of his particular field, must be retrained at least 4 times during his lifetime. Think of this: what was not only right, but even plausible yesterday is questionable today and might even be wrong tomorrow. It is somewhat disenchanting, I know, to find that just as we learn one role in life, we are suddenly called upon to play an entirely new part, unrehearsed, as the drama of life must go on either with us or without us. Knowledge is accumulating so fast and methods of doing things improving so rapidly that a person today must run to stand still. Up to 19, it was said that the accumulation of knowledge doubled every century. At the end of World War I, knowledge doubled every 25 years. Today, all research centers tell us that the volume of knowledge in existence doubles every 5 years. Where does that leave the person today who thinks he can stand still and survive? True success is a journey, not a destination. The constant demands of readjustment offer challenge today that never existed before. No longer is preparation something that can be put in a drawer and forgotten about. Success itself has taken on a new definition. It might even be termed today as the constant and continuing preparation of ourselves to meet the constant and continuing changes of our economic system. Yes, success today is a journey and not a destination. Furthermore, in making this trip, the important thing is that we must be constantly moving forward, the progressive realization of a predetermined goal. And our growth should never end. Any person who selects a goal in life which can be fully achieved has already defined his own limitations. When we cease to grow, we begin to die. Horizons of change. One of the confusing mysteries to a child who travels along any road is that he cannot ever catch up with the horizon. None of us today can ever catch up with the horizons of change. We can only move in their direction. I am sure it is a blessing that our reach does exceed our grasp. If our ambitions in life can be fully reached, then we have not hitched our wagon to a star. We would, 294 Semester 6, do a great injustice to anyone if we painted the journey as being a path of roses. It is a pilgrim's road, full of obstacles and sacrifices. The only promise we can make is that if a person is willing to brave the hazards of the road, he will grow strong in the journey and keep pace with changing times. I am sure you agree with me that regardless of how well qualified a person may be to meet the rigors of life today, if he is lulled into a sense of false security in feeling that he needs no additional preparation for the future, that his journey can never be ended, soon he will find that he is lost in the frustrations of medieval thinking. We have heard it said many times that there is nothing in life as powerful as an idea whose time has a rivet uncle that is timely. If ideas are to be current and if knowledge is to be up to date, they must be forever moving, never static. And so, first and foremost, we must embrace the principle that in order to be knowledgeable in these changing times, we must pursue a constant program of self-improvement, a never-ending journey into new fields of knowledge and learning. A day of specialization, because of the rapidly accumulating volume of knowledge. Today, it is becoming increasingly important to specialize in some business, industry, or profession. There is no escape. This, of course, doesn't mean that an individual should not be well informed in the broad fundamentals and generalities. But it does mean that, in addition to this, he should to some extent be particularly knowledgeable in some aspect of his endeavors. A rather frustrated individual the other day said, "Since we must know more and more about less and less, I guess this also means we must know less and less about more and more, which also means pretty soon we are going to know everything about nothing and nothing about everything. Just how specialized are we?" Two fellows were talking the other day, and one said, "Do you know, things are getting so specialized today that the National Biscuit Company even has a Vesperist in charge of Newtons." The other said, "I don't believe it." "I'll bet you," said Th first. So they put up the money and then proceeded to call the National Biscuit Company. Lesson 29, 295. One said, "I want to speak to the Vesperist in charge of Fig Newtons." The answer came back, "Package drawer loose." The president of one of the largest rubber companies was recently making a speech. After he finished, the chairman opened the meeting for questions. A young man in the front row said, "Would it be too personal if one asked you how you got to be president of this big company?" "Not at all," was the president's reply. "I was working in a filling station and not making much progress. One day one read that if a person wanted to get ahead, he must know all there was to know about his particular product. So, on one of my vacations, one went back to the home office and watched them make rubber tires. It watched them put in the nylon cords. On one vacation, one went to Africa to watch them plant the rubber trees and even extract the base of crude rubber. So that when one talked about my product, one didn't say, 'This is what I'm told,' or 'This is what one read,' or 'This is what one think.' No, one said, 'This is what one know.' One was there. I watched them put those nylon cords in to make the finest tire ever made, to protect your family against blowouts. One watched them extract that crude rubber to make the finest tire in the world." He then continued, "There is no force in the world that has a greater impact than the statement of a knowledgeable person, fortified by confidence and experience. A man who knows and knows he knows can speak with authority that has no comparison. The world makes way for a man who knows what he's doing. Only one wealth on this earth," Lincoln once said. "The older one gets, the more one realizes that there is but one wealth, one security on this earth led, i.e. found in the ability of a person to perform a task well." But he didn't stop there. He went on to say, and first and foremost this ability must start with knowledge. A superficial knowledge is not enough. it must be a knowledge capable of analyzing a situation quickly and making an immediate decision. A quarterback in the closing moments of an important game called the wrong signal. A pass was intercepted in the game and conference championship were lost. That was on a Saturday. By Tuesday afternoon, he had courage enough to venture out and be seen. He had to go out and get a haircut. 296, Semester 6, the barber, after a long silence, said, "I've been studying and thinking about that play you called last Saturday ever since you called it, and you know, if I had been in your shoes I don't believe I would have called it." The quarterback, without changing expression, said, "No, and if it had until Tuesday afternoon to think about it, I wouldn't have either." In this modern, competitive, and fast-moving economy of today, we often don't have time to think things over and give the careful consideration to each situation which we would desire. But still, I repeat, a superficial knowledge is not enough. Furthermore, a person who tries to substitute gimmicks and gadgets and gizmos for knowledge usually finds that it all boomerangs on him, meets himself coming around the corner. Such an attempt reminds one of the headhunter who bought himself a new boomerang. Then he spent the rest of life trying to throw the old one away. I feel very sorry for anyone who thinks it's possible to substitute pull or personality or any other quality for fundamental knowledge. Yes, let's remember the sound advice of Will Rogers. If we are to be successful, we must first know what we are doing. Love what you are doing, but knowledge, important as it is not enough to ensure success in our complex society today. We have often heard it said, "A merely well-informed man is the most useless bore on earth." What was Will Rogers' next statement? Not only know what you are doing, but love what you are doing. What are we working for? Do we love our work, or are we working for money alone? If it's for money alone, we are underpaid, regardless of what we are making for chonger. That's all. We shall be working for as long as we live. Everybody loves to do business with an optimist. We can only be an optimist if we love what we are doing. Nothing takes a greater toll on us than to be around a pessimist, a person always finding fault and criticizing others. We've all seen the type. He has mantle B. Oh, he's a one-man grievance committee always in session. He criticizes everyone and everything. You ask him how is business and he says, "Well, I made a sale Monday. I didn't sell anything Tuesday. Wednesday, lesson 29, 297. The deal I made Monday fell through, so I guess Tuesday was really my best day. I was recently in Boston attending a convention. I was kicked out of the hotel after 2 days. I thought I had a 3-day reservation. As the elevator came down, it stopped at the 7th floor, but nothing happened. I was irritated and in a hurry to catch an early plane and said, 'Come on in.' Nothing happened. Again I said firmly, 'Come and let's get the show on the road.' Still nothing happened. Finally, in a loud voice, I said, 'Come on in, let's go.' He'll be left. At that moment, a fine-looking man with a white cane, completely blind, stepped in cautiously, feeling his way along. I felt awful. I had to say something, so I cleared my throat and said, 'How are you today?' He smiled and said, 'Grateful, my friend, grateful.' I couldn't say a thing, he was choked up. Any impatience or worry I had simply shriveled into nothingness. Here was a man blessing the darkness while I was cursing the light. I couldn't have cared less whether I caught that plane. I found myself that night in my prayers asking that someday I might see as well as that person. Actually, each morning when we wake up, if we don't find our names listed in the obituary column, we should be so grateful that we are happy all day. We can say something nice about every person or subject involved in a conversation. We can at least remain silent. Nothing is wrong. Someone said that even the black hole of Calcutta was easy to heat. Down in Mississippi, we would say that prohibition was horrible, but that it was better than no whiskey at all. I heard a man's name brought up the other day, and someone lowered his voice and said, "Why, that fellow's a confirmed alcoholic." The other person present said, "Well, at least he ain't no quitter." Let's follow Will Rogers' advice. Let's constantly seek a little larger slice out of life, a few more acres of the Garden of Eden. Let's look for the happier things of existence. The great Will, 298, Semester 6, Rogers had the reputation of never criticizing. Why? Because he never met a man he didn't like. Believe in what you are doing. Yes, Will Rogers said, know what you are doing, love what you are doing. But he didn't stop there. He went further and said, believe in what you are doing. I heard of a man who telephoned his friend and said, Jake, I'm having a little informal birthday party tomorrow night. and I want you to come to it. Come just as you are, don't stand on any ceremony. Just come right on up to the door and ring the doorbell with your elbow and come right in." The fellow said, "Well, that's all fine and good, but why my elbow?" His friend said, "Jake, maybe you didn't understand. It's my birthday. You are not coming empty-handed, are you? Above all else, I don't want you to be empty-handed. If you feel amused at a few anecdotes, if you are emotionally stirred or even mentally stimulated, that's not enough. The ultimate in human persuasion, in order that you will not be empty-handed, I shall give you, in the next few sentences, the greatest principle of human persuasion that exists. There is nothing which is even a close second. If there is anything that is worth remembering, it is this: people are persuaded elevator by the depth of your conviction, than by the height of your logic, more by your own enthusiasm than any proof you can offer. If I could describe the art of persuasion in one sentence, it would be this, and I know I would be right. Persuasion is converting pioplino, not to our way of thinking, but to our way of feeling and believing. And if a person's belief is sincere enough and deep enough, he is a walking climate of positive acceptance. He has an obsession that cannot be denied. The most persuasive person in the world is the man who has a fanatical belief in an idea, a product, or a service. The one common denominator of all great men in history is that they believed in what they were doing. If we could choose but one lantern to guide our footsteps over the perilous quicksands of the future, it should be the guiding light of dedication. Lesson 29. 299. It has been said that words are the fingers that mold the mind of man. Words, however, can be refused, but a positive attitude that springs from a sincere belief cannot. You must first believe in the idea yourself. I've heard people say, in effect, "Do you believe in clairvoyance, telepathy, or psychopractic?" It's a strange thing. I knew that person was going to accept my idea the moment I walked in. Do you think I could have received thought transference? The answer is too obvious to need elaboration. The person presenting the idea had already made the big sale. He had bought the idea himself so completely that he was practically hypnotic in his persuasive powers. On the other hand, I have heard a person say, "I can't explain it, but I knew that fellow was not going to accept my idea even before I opened my mouth." Of course he lost. The person presenting the idea didn't believe in it, and he radiated this lack of belief. He was simply admitting that he had no enthusiasm for the idea, and consequently, he called a project any enthusiasm. Yes, I repeat, the world is a looking glass and gives back to every person a reflection of his own thoughts, beliefs, and enthusiasm. I have a picture at home that a friend painted for me. It's a picture of an old tramp sitting on a park bench. He has holes in his shoes, his knees are out, and he needs a shave. His hair looks as though it had been combed with an egg beater, and he's chewing up straw. A Rolls Royce goes by, driven by a chauffeur, carrying a man in a tall silk hat. The tramp looks at it lazily and philosophically says there, "Except for me, go on. Don't chain yourself to mediocrity." The only chains and shackles that prevent any of us from realizing our life's dreams are those we ourselves forge in the fires of doubt and hammer out, keying the anvil of lack of belief in what we say or do. Will Rogers, bless his great heart, said, "Know what you are doing, love what you are doing, believe in what you are doing." 3. Semester 6. Where can we find any directional compass in life better than this? I know of no qualities that can be a better formula to follow say for directional compass. These 3 great directives of Will Rogers. Study them carefully and have faith in their guiding quality. They can lead only to success. The quality of your work in the long run is the deciding factor on how much your services are valued by the world. Orison Swett Martin. Lesson 3. How to increase your value. Charles Kettering of General Motors fame said, "I tell my people that I don't want any fellow who has a job working for me. What I want is a fellow whom a job has. And I want the job to get a hold on this young man so hard that no matter where he is, the job has got him for keeps. I want that job to have him in its clutches when he goes to bed at night. And in the morning I want that job to be sitting at the foot of the bed telling him, it's time to get up and go to world, and when a job gets a fellow that way, he's sure to amount to something." Unfortunately, Mr. Kettering's ideal employee is becoming more and more of a rarity in any company, large and small. Quality of any sort is now such a precious commodity that we are willing to pay exorbitant amounts for an automobile that has been assembled properly, a camera that doesn't jam, even a wallet that won't fall apart. This applies as well to personal services. A first-class attorney, salesman, doctor, or mechanician who still takes pride in his work is worth his or her weight in gold. Or since Mandino was America's first popular writer on the subject of success. His classic, Pushing to the Front, swept across the nation before the turn of the century, was published in several languages, and even became a bestseller in Japan. There is a special quality in the older writings on success that one does not find very often today. Perhaps those writers of another 31-32 semester 6 era wrote with greater intensity, which, combined with the antiquity of their grammar, lends an almost biblical flavor to their work. In any event, it is hoped that Mr. Martin's extraordinary power with words in this lesson from Pushing to the Front will cause you to think twice the next time you may be tempted to deliver less than your best. Years ago, a relief lifeboat at New London sprung a leak, and, while being repaired, a hammer was found in the bottom that had been left there by the builders 13 years before. From the constant motion of the boat, the hammer had worn through the planking, clear down to the plating. Not long since, it was discovered that a girl had served 20 years for a 20-month sentence in a southern prison because of the mistake of a court clerk who wrote years instead of months in the record of the prisoner's sentence. The history of the human race is full of the most horrible tragedies caused by carelessness and the inexcusable blunders of those who never formed the habit of accuracy, of thoroughness, of doing things to a finish. Multitudes of people have lost an eye, a leg, or an arm, or are otherwise maimed, because dishonest workmen wrought deception into the articles they manufactured, slighted their work, covered up defects and weak places with paint and varnish. How many have lost then lives because of dishonest work, carelessness, criminal blundering in railroad construction? Think of the tragedies caused by lies packed in car wheels, lumotapes, steamboat boilers, and engines, lies in defective rails, ties, or switches, lies in dishonest labor put into manufactured material by workmen who said it was good enough for the meager wages they got because people were not conscientious in their work. There were flaws in the steel, which caused the rail or pillar to snap, the locomotive or other machinery to break. The steel shaft broke in mid-ocean, and the lives of 1,000 passengers were jeopardized because of somebody's carelessness. Even before they are completed, buildings often fall and bury the workmen under their ruins because somebody was careless, dishonest employer or employed and worked lies, deceptions into the building. In Lesson 3:33, the majority of railroad wrecks, of disasters on land and sea, which cause so much misery and cost so many lives, are the result of carelessness, tuftlessness, or half-alone, blotched, blundering work. They are the evil fruit of the low ideals of slovenly, careless, indifferent workers. Everywhere over this broad earth we see the tragic results of botched work. Wooden legs, armless sleeves, numberless graves, fatherless and motherless homes everywhere speak of somebody's carelessness, somebody's blunders, somebody's habit of inaccuracy. The worst crimes are not punishable by law. Carelessness, slipshodness, lack of thoroughness are crimes against self, against humanity, that often do more harm than the crimes that make the perpetrator an outcast from society. Where a tiny flaw or the slightest defect may cost a precious life, carelessness is as much a crime as deliberate criminality. Everybody put his conscience into his work, did it to a complete finish, it would not only reduce the loss of human life, the mangling and maiming of men and women, to a fraction of what it is at present, but it would also give us a higher quality of manhood and womanhood. Most people think too much of quantity, and too little of quality in their work. They try to do too much, and do not do it well. They do not realize that the education, the comfort, the satisfaction, the general improvement and bracing up of the whole man that comes from doing one thing absolutely right, from putting the trademark of one's character on it, far outweighs the value that attaches to the doing of 1,000 botched or slipshod jobs. We are so constituted that the quality which we put into our life work affects everything else in our lives, and tends to bring our whole conduct to the same level. The entire person takes keen the characteristics of one's usual way of doing things. The habit of precision and accuracy strengthens the mentality, improves the whole character. On the contrary, doing things in a lucid and slipshod, careless manner deteriorates the whole mentality, demoralizes the mental processes, and pulls down the whole life. Every half-alone or slovenly job that goes out of your hands leaves its trace of demoralization behind. After slighting your work, after doing a poor job, you are not quite the same man you were before. You are not so likely to try to keep up the standard of your work, not so likely to regard your word as sacred as before. The mental and moral effect of half-doing or carelessly doing things its power to drag down, to demoralize, can hardly be estimated because the processes are so gradual, so subtle. No one, 34, semester 6, can respect himself who habitually botches his work, and when self-respect drops, confidence goes with it, and when confidence and self-respect have gone, excellence is impossible. It is astonishing how completely a slovenly habit will gradually, insidiously fasten itself upon the individual and so change his whole mental attitude as to thwart absolutely his life of Europe's, even when he may think he's doing his best to carry it out. I know a man who was extremely ambitious to do something very distinctive and who had the ability to do it. When he started on his career, he was very exact and painstaking. He demanded the best of himself, would not accept his secondist in anything. The thought of slighting his work was painful to him, but his mental processes have so deteriorated, and he has become so demoralized by the habit which, after a while, grew upon him of accepting his secondist, that he now slights his work without a protest, seemingly without being conscious of it. He is today doing quite ordinary things without apparent mortification or sense of humiliation, and the tragedy of it all is, he does not know why he has failed. One's ambition and ideals need constant watching and cultivation in order to keep up to the standards. Many people are so constituted that their ambition wanes and their ideals drop when they are alone or with careless, indifferent people. They require the constant assistance, suggestion, prodding, or example of others to keep them up to standard. How quickly a youth of high ideals, who has been well trained in thoroughness, often deteriorates when he leaves home and goes to work for an employer with inferior ideals and slipshod methods. The introduction of inferiority into our work is like introducing subtle poison into the system. It paralyzes the normal function. Inferiority is an infection which, like leaven, affects the entire system. It drills ideals, palsies the aspiring faculty, stupefies the ambition, and causes deterioration all along the line. The human mechanism is so constituted that whatever goes wrong in one part affects the whole structure. There is a very intimate relation between the quality of the work and the quality of the character. Did you ever notice the rapid decline in a young man's character when he began to slight his work, to shirk, to slip in rotten hours, rotten service? You should ask the inmates of our penitentiaries what had caused their ruin. Many of them could trace the first signs of deterioration to shirking, clipping their hours, deceiving their employer, to indifferent, dishonest work. We were made to be honest. Honesty is our normal expers, lesson 3:35. Cyan, and any departure from it demoralizes and taints the whole character. Honesty means integrity in everything. It not only means reliability in your word, but also careful one's accuracy, honesty in your work. It does not mean that if only you will not lie with your lips, you may lie and defraud in the quality of your work. Honesty means wholeness, completeness. It means truth in everything, in deed and in word. Merely not to steal another's money or goods is not all there is to honesty. You must not steal another's time. You must not steal his goods or ruin his property by half-finishing or botching your work, by blundering through carelessness or indifference. Your contract with your employer means that you will give him your best and not your secondest. What a fool you are, said one workman to another, to take so much pains with that job when you don't get much pay for it. Get the most money for the least work is my rule, and I get twice as much money as you do. That may be, replied the other, but I shall like myself better. I shall think more of myself, and that is more important to me than money. You will like yourself better when you have the approval of your conscience. That will be worth more to you than any amount of money you can pocket through fraudulent, skimped, or botched work. Nothing else can give you the glow of satisfaction, the electric thrill and uplift which comes from a superbly done job. Perfect work harmonizes with the very principles of our being, because we were made for perfection. It fits our very natures. Someone has said, it is a race between negligence and ignorance as to which can make the more trouble. Many a young man is being kept down by what probably seems a small thing to him, lack of accuracy. He never quite finishes anything he undertakes. He cannot be depended upon to do anything quite right. His work always needs looking over by someone else. Hundreds of clerks and bookkeepers are getting small salaries in poor positions today because they have never learned to do things absolutely right. A prominent businessman says that the carelessness, inaccuracy, and blundering of employees cost Chicago $1 million a day. The manager of a large house in that city says that he has to station pickets here and there throughout the establishment in order to neutralize the evils of inaccuracy and the blundering habit. One of John Wanamaker's partners says that unnecessary blunders and mistakes cost that firm $25,000 a year. The dead letter department of the post office in Washington received in 1 year 7 million pieces of undelivered mail. Of 36. Semester 6, these more than 80,000 bore no address whatever. A great many of them were from business houses. Are the clerks who are responsible for this carelessness likely to win promotion? Many an employee who would be shocked at the thought of telling his employer a lie with his lips is lying every day in the quality of his work, in his dishonest service, in the rotten hours he is slipping into it, in shirking, in his indifference to his employer's interests. It is just as dishonest to express deception in poor work, in shirking, as to express it with the lips. Yet I have known office boys who could not be induced to tell their employer a direct lie, to steal his time when on an air and to hide away during working hours to smoke a cigarette or take a nap, not realizing, perhaps, that one's can be acted as well as told, and that acting a lie may be even worse than telling one. The man who botches his work, who lies or cheats in the goods he sells or manufactures, is dishonest with himself as well as with his fellow men, and must pay the price in loss of self-respect, loss of character, of standing in his community. Yet on every side we see all sorts of things selling for song, because the maker put no character, no thought into them. Articles of clothing that look stylish and attractive when first worn, very quickly get out of shape and hang and look like old, muck-worn garments. Buttons fly off, seams give way at the slightest strain. Dropped stitches are everywhere in evidence, and often the entire article goes to pieces before it is worn half a dozen times. Everywhere we see furniture which looks all right, but which in reality is full of blemishes and weaknesses, covered up with paint and varnish. Glue starts at joints, chairs and bedstead break down. At the slightest provocation, casters come off, handles pull out. Many things go to pieces altogether, even while practically new. Made to sell, not for service, would be a good label for the great mass of manufactured articles in our markets today. It is difficult to find anything that is well and honestly made, that has character, individuality, and thoroughness wrought into it. Most things are just thrown together. This slipshod, dishonest manufacturing is so general that concerns which turn out products based upon honesty and truth often win for themselves a worldwide reputation and command the highest prices. There is no other advertisement like a good reputation. Some of the world's greatest manufacturers have regarded their reputation as their most precious possession, and under no circumstances would they allow their names to be put on an imperfect article. Vast sums of money are often paid for the use of a name, because of its great reputation for integrity and square dealing. Lesson 3:37. There was a time when the names of Graham and Tampion on timepieces were guarantees of the most exquisite workmanship, and of unquestioned integrity. Strangers from any part of the world could send their purchase money and order goods from those manufacturers without a doubt that they would be squarely dealt with. Tampion and Graham lie in Westminster Abbey because of the accuracy of their work biscanes they refused to manufacture and sell lies. When you finish a thing, you ought to be able to say to yourself, there, I am willing to stand for that piece of work. It is not pretty well done, it is done as well as I can do it, done to a complete finish. I will stand for that. I am willing to be judged by it. Never be satisfied with fairly good, pretty good, good enough. Accept nothing short of your best. Put such a quality into your work that anyone who comes across anything you have ever done will see character in it, individuality in it, your trademark of superiority upon it. Your reputation is at stake in everything you do, and your reputation is your capital. You cannot afford to do a poor job, to let botched work or anything that is inferior go out of your hands. Every bit of your work, no matter how unimportant or trivial it may seem, should bear your trademark of excellence. You should regard every task that goes through your hands, every piece of work you touch, as Tampion regarded every watch that went out of his shop. It must be the very best you can do, the best that human skill can produce. It is just the little difference between the good and the best that makes the difference between the artist and the artisan. It is just the little touches after the average man would quit that make the master's fame. Regard your work as Stradivarius regarded his violins, which he made for eternity, and not one of which was ever known to come to pieces or break. Stradivarius did not need any patent on his violins, for no other violin maker would pay such a price for excellence as he paid, would take such pains to put his stamp of superiority upon his instrument. Every Stradivarius now in existence is worth from $3,000 to $10,000, or several times its weight in gold. Think of the value such a reputation for thoroughness as that of Stradivarius or Tampion, such a passion to give quality to your work, would give you. There is nothing like being enamored of accuracy, being grounded in thoroughness as a life principle, of always striving for excellence. The 38, Semester 6, no other characteristic makes such a strong impression upon an employer as the habit of painstaking, careful accuracy. He knows that if a youth puts his conscience into his work from principle, not from the standpoint of salary or what he can get for it, but because there is something in him which refuses to accept anything from himself but the best, that he is honest and made of good material. I have known many instances where advancement hinged upon the little overplus of interest, of painstaking an employee put into his work, on his doing a little better than was expected of him. Employers do not say all they think, but they detect very quickly the earmarks of superiority. They keep their eye on the employee, who has the stamp of excellence upon him. Leek takes pains with his work, who does it to a finish. They know he has a future. John D. Rockefeller, Jr. says that the secret of success is to do the common duty uncommonly well. The majority of people do not see that the steps which led to the position above them are constructed, little by the faithful performance of the common, humble, everyday duties of the position they are now filling. The thing which you are now doing will unlock or bar the door to promotion. Many employees are looking for some great thing to happen that will give them an opportunity to show their mettle. What can there be, they say to themselves, in this dry routine, in doing these common, ordinary things to help me along? But it is the youth who sees a great opportunity hidden in just these simple services, who sees a very uncommon chance in a common situation, a humble position, who gets on in the world. It is doing things a little better than those about you do them, being a little neater, a little quicker, a little more accurate, a little more observant. It is ingenuity in finding new and more progressive ways of doing old things. It is being a little more polite, a little more obliging, a little more tactful, a little more cheerful, optimistic, a little more energetic, helpful than those about you that attracts the attention of your employer and other employers also. Many a person is marked for a higher position by his employer long before he is aware of it himself. It may be months, or it may be a year before the opening comes, but when it does come, the one who has appreciated the infinite difference between good and better, between fairly good and excellent, between what others call good and the best that can be done, will be likely to get the place. If there is that in your nature which demands the best and will take nothing less if you insist on keeping up your standards in Lesson 339, everything you do, you will achieve distinction in some line, provided you have the persistence and determination to follow your ideal. But if you are satisfied with the cheap and shoddy, the botched and slovenly, if you are not particular about quality in your work, or in your environment, or in your personal habits, then you must expect to take second place, to fall back to the rear of the procession. People who have accomplished work worth while have had a very high sense of the way to do things. They have not been content with mediocrity. They have not confined themselves to the beaten tracks. They have never been satisfied to do things just as others do them, but always a little better. They always pushed things that came to their hands a little higher up, a little farther on. It is this little higher up, this little farther on, that counts in the quality of life's work. It is the constant effort to be first class in everything one attempts that conquers the heights of excellence. It is said that Daniel Webster made the best chowder in his state on the principle that he would not be second sculls in anything. This is a good resolution with which to start out in your career, never to be second sculls in anything. No matter what you do, try to do it as well as it can be done. Have nothing to do with the inferior. Do your best in everything, deal with the best, choose the best, live up to your best. Everywhere we see mediocre or second sculls men, perpetual clerks who will never get away from the yardstick, mechanics who will never be anything but bunglers, all sorts of people who will never rise above mediocrity, who will always fill very ordinary positions because they do not take pains, do not put conscience into their work, do not try to be first class. Aside from the lack of desire or effort to be first class, there are other things that help to make second sculls men. Dissipation, bad habits, neglect of health, failure to get an education, all make second sculls men. A man weakened by dissipation, whose understanding has been dulled, whose growth has been stunted by self-indulgences, is a second schools man, if, indeed, he is not third class. A man who, through his amusements and his hours of leisure, exhausts his strength and vitality, vitiates his blood, wears his nerves till his limbs tremble like leaves in the wind, is only half a man, and could in no sense be called first class. Everybody knows the things that make for second schools characteristics. Boys imitate older boys and smoke cigarettes in order to be smart. Then they keep on smoking because they have created an appetite as unnatural as it is harmful. Men get drunk 4:31, semester 6, all sorts of reasons, but, whatever the reason, they cannot remain first-class men and drink. Dissipation in other forms is pursued because of pleasure to be derived, but the surest consequence is that of becoming second schools, below the standard of the best men for any purpose. Every fault you allow to become a habit, to get control over you, helps to make you second schools and puts you at a disadvantage in the race for honor, position, wealth, and happiness. Carelessness as to health fills the ranks of the inferior. The submerged classes that the economists talk about are those that are below the high-water mark of the best manhood and womanhood. Sometimes they are second-rate or third-rate a people because those who are responsible for their being and their care during their minor years were so before them, but more and more is it becoming one's own fault if, all through life, he remains second schools. Education of some sort, and even a pretty good sort, is possible to practically everyone in our land. Failure to get the best education available, whether it be in books or in business training, is sure to relegate one to the ranks of the second schools. There is no excuse for incompetence in this age of opportunity, no excuse for being second schools when it is possible to be first class, and when first class is in demand everywhere. Second schools things are wanted only when first class can't be had. You wear first class clothes if you can pay for them, eat first class butter, first class meat, and first class bread, or if you don't, you wish you could. Second schools men are no more wanted than any other second schools commodity. They are taken and used when the better article is scarce or is too high-priced for the occasion. For work that really amounts to anything, first-class men are wanted. If you make yourself first class in anything, no matter what your condition or circumstances, no matter what your race or color, you will be in demand. If you are a king in your calling, no matter how humble it may be, nothing can keep you from success. The world does not demand that you be a physician, a lawyer, a farmer, or a merchant, but it does demand that whatever you do undertake, you will do it right, will do it with all your might and with all the ability you possess. It demands that you be a master in your line. When Daniel Webster, who had the best brain of his time, was asked to make a speech on some question at the close of a congressional session, he replied, "I never allow myself to speak on any subject until I have made it my own. I haven't time to do that in this case, hence, I must preface to speak on the subject." Lesson 311. Dickens would never consent to read before an audience until he had thoroughly prepared his selection. Balzac, the great French novelist, sometimes worked a week on a single page. William Macready, when playing before scant audiences in country theatres in England, Ireland, and Scotland, always played as if he were before the most brilliant audiences in the great metropolises of the world. Thoroughness characterizes all successful men. Genius is the art of taking infinite pains. The trouble with many Americans is that they seem to think they can put any sort of poor, slipshod, half-alone work into their careers and get first-class products. They do not realize that all great achievement has been characterized by extreme care, infinite painstaking, even to the minutest detail. No youth can ever hope to accomplish much who does not have earwinces and accuracy indelibly fixed in his life habit. Slipshodness, inaccuracy, the habit of half-doing things, would ruin the career of a youth with a Napoleon's mind. If we were to examine a list of the men who have left their mark on the world, we should find that, as a rule, it is not composed of those who were brilliant in youth or who gave great promise at the outset of their careers, but rather of the plodding young men who, if they have not dazzled by their brilliancy, have had the power of a day's work in them, who could stay by a task until it was done and well done, who have had grit, persistence, common sense, and honesty. The thorough boys are the boys who are heard from, and usually from posts far higher up than those filled by the boys who were too smart to be thorough. One such boy is Elihu Root, now United States Senator. When he was a boy in the grammar school at Clinton, New York, he made up his mind that anything he had to study he would keep at until he mastered it. Although not considered one of the bright boys of the school, his teacher soon found that when Elihu professed to know anything, he knew it through and through. He was fond of hard problems requiring application and patience. Sometimes the other boys called him a plodder, but Elihu would only smile pleasantly, for he knew what he was about. On winter evenings, while the other boys were out skating, Elihu frequently remained in his room with his arithmetic or algebra. Mr. Root recently said that if his close application to problems in his boyhood did nothing else for him, it made him careful about jumping at conclusions. To every problem there was only one answer, and patience was the price to be paid for it. 312. Semester 6, carrying the principle of doing everything to a finish into the law, he became one of the most noted members of the New York bar, entrusted with vast interests, and then a member of the president's cabinet. William Mallory Channing, the great New England divine, who in his youth was hardly able to buy the clothes he needed, had a passion for self-improvement. I wanted to make the most of myself. He says I was not satisfied with knowing things superficially and by halves, but tried to get comprehensive views of what one studied. How a great lack I want of thoroughness. How seldom you find a young man or woman who is willing to prepare for his life work. A little education is all they want, a little smattering of books, and then they are ready for business. Can't wait, haven't time to be thorough is characteristic of our country, and is written on everything in commerce, on schools, on society, on religious institutions. We can't wait for a high school, seminary, or college education. The boy can't wait to become a youth, nor the youth to become a man. Young men rush into business with no great reserve of education or drill or course. They do poor, feverish work, and break down in middle life, while many die of old age in the 40s. Perhaps there is no other country in the world where so much poor work is done as in America. Half-trained medical students perform bungling operations and butcher their patients, because they are not willing to take time for thorough preparation. Half-trained lawyers stumble through their cases and make their clients pay for experience which the law school should have given. Half-trained clergymen bungle away in the pulpit and disgust their intelligent and cultured parishioners. Many an American youth is willing to stumble through life half prepared for his work, and then blame society because he is a failure. A young man, armed with letters of introduction from prominent men, one day presented himself before Chief Engineer Parsons of the Rapid Transit Commission of New York as a candidate for a position. "What can you do? Have you any specialty?" asked Mr. Parsons. "I can do almost anything," answered the young man. "Well," remarked the chief engineer, rising to end the interview, "I have no use for anyone who can almost do anything. One prefers someone who can actually do one thing thoroughly. There is a great crowd of human beings just outside the door of proficiency. They can half do a great many things, but can't do any one thing well to a finish. They have acquisitions which remain permanently unavailable because they were not carried. Lesson 313, quite to the point of skill, they stop just short of efficiency. How many people almost know a language or two, which they can neither write nor speak, a science or two, whose elements they have not fully mastered, and art or two, which they cannot practice with satisfaction or profit. The Patent Office at Washington contains hundreds, thousands of inventions which are useless simply because they are not quite practical, because the men who started them lacked the staying quality, the education, or the ability necessary to carry them to the point of practicability. The world is full of half-finished work foils which require only a little more persistence, a little finer mechanical training, a little better education, to make them useful to civilization. Think what a loss it would be if such men as Edison and Bell had not come to the front and carried to a successful termination the half-finished work of others. Make it a life rule to give your best to whatever passes through your hands. Stamp it with your manhood. Let superiority be your trademark. Let it characterize everything you touch. This is what every employer is looking for. It indicates the best kind of brain. It is the best substitute for genius. It is better capital than cash. It is a better promoter than friends or pulls with the influential. A successful manufacturer says if you make a good pen, you will earn more money than if you make a bad steam engine. If a man can write a better book, preach a better sermon, or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, says Emerson, though he build his house in the woods, the world will make a path to his door. Never allow yourself to dwell too much upon what you are getting for your work. You have something of infinitely greater importance, greater value at stake. Your honor, your whole career, your future success will be affected by the way you do your work, by the conscience or lack of it which you put into your job. Character, manhood, and womanhood are at stake, compared with which salary is nothing. Everything you do is a part of your career. If any work that goes out of your hands is skimped, shirked, bungled, or botched, your character will suffer. If your work is badly done, if it goes to pieces, if there is shoddy or sham in it, if there is dishonesty in it, there is shoddy, sham, dishonesty in your character. We are all of a piece. We cannot have an honest character, a complete, an enriching career, when we are constantly slipping rotten hours, defect, material, and slipshod service into our work. E314, Semester 6, the man who has dealt in shams and inferiority, who has botched his work all his life, must be conscio us that he has not been a real man. He cannot help feeling that his career has been a botched one. To spend a life buying and selling lies, dealing in cheap, shoddy shams, or botching one's work is demoralizing to every element of nobility. Beecher said he was never again quite the same man after reading Ruskin. You are never again quite the same man after doing a poor job, after botching your work. You cannot be just to yourself and unjust to the man you are working for in the quality of your work, for if you slight your work, you not only strike a fatal blow at your efficacies, but also smirch your character. If you would be a full man, a complete man, a just man, you must be honest to the core in the quality of your work. None can be really happy who does not believe in his own honesty. We are so constituted that every departure from the right, from principle, causes loss of self-respect and makes us unhappy. Every time we obey the inward law of doing right, he ran inward approval, the amen of the soul, and every time we disobey it, a protest or condemnation. There is everything in holding a high ideal of your work, for whatever model the mind holds, the life copies. Whatever your vocation, let quality be your life sovereign. A famous artist said he would never allow himself to look at an inferior drawing or painting, to do anything that was low or demoralizing, lest familiarity with it should taint his own ideal and thus be communicated to his brush. Many excuse poor, slipshod work on the plea of lack of time. But in the ordinary situations of life, there is plenty of time to do everything as it ought to be done. There is an indescribable superiority added to the character and fiber of the man who always and everywhere puts quality into his work. There is a sense of wholeness, of satisfaction, of happiness in his life which is never felt by the man who does not do his level best every time. He is not haunted by the ghosts or talents of half-finished tasks, of skipped problems, is not kept awake by a troubled conscience. When we are trying with all our might to do our level best, our whole nature improves. Everything looks down when we are going downhill. Aspiration lifts the life, groveling lowers it. Don't think you will never hear from a half-finished job, a neglected or botched piece of work. It will never die. It will bob. Lesson 315, up farther along in your career at the most unexpected moments, in the most embarrassing situations. It will be sure to mortify you when you least expect it. Like Banquo's ghost, it will arise at the most unexpected moments to mar your happiness. Thousands of people are held back all their lives and obliged to accept inferior positions because they cannot entirely overcome the handicap of slipshod habits formed early in life, habits of inaccuracy, of slovenliness, of skipping difficult problems in school, of slurring their work, shirking, or half doing it. Oh, that's good enough, which the use of being so awfully particular has been the beginning of a lifelong handicap in many a career. I was much impressed by this motto, which I saw recently in a great establishment, where only the best is good enough. What a leitmotif this would be! How it would revolutionize civilization if everyone were to adopt it and use it to resolve that whatever they did, only the best they could do would be good enough, would satisfy them. Adopt this motto as yours. Hang it up in your bedroom, in your office, or place of business. Put it into your pocketbook. Weave it into the texture of everything you do, and your life work will be what everyone's should be, masterpiece. Semester 7. Nothing will make us so charitable and tender to the faults of others as by self-commendation thoroughly to know our own. Franfos D.S. Fenelon. Criticism of others is futile, and if you indulge in it often you should be warned that it can be fatal to your career. Dale Carnegie. Lesson 31. How to gather honey instead of bee stings. There is no such being as a self-made person. Those who have truly earned the world's respect and admiration for their outstanding accomplishments are always quick to point out the many helping hands throughout their life that helped them reach the pinnacle. You do not live in a vacuum, nor can you harvest the better fruits of life, without help and encouragement from others. As members of a wide human society, your growth depends, to a large degree, on how well you handle your contacts with those who cross your path every hour of the day. Without friendship and assistance, the successes you enjoy will be few, if any. Even Robinson Crusoe rejoiced when he finally discovered Friday. Why is it then that so many of us go out of our way to offend others with criticism and offensive judgments that so often come back to haunt us? Why do we allow our big mouths to dig ruts in our path so deep that our forward progress is finally nil? Is this more of that will to fail that has already been covered? Perhaps. If your tongue has been busy accumulating enemies for you, enemies you do not need, what can harm you, now is as good a time as any to cease and desist. How sad it would be for such a petty habit to destroy your great potential. This important lesson is from How to Win Friends and Influence Pinesin, which has remained high on bestseller lists for almost 50 years. No one is more capable of teaching you how to deal with people effectively than its famous author Dale Carnegie. 319-32. On Semester 7, May 7, 1931, New York City witnessed the most sensational manhunt the old town had ever known. After weeks of search, Togan Crowley Killer, the gunman who didn't smoke or drink, was at bay, trapped in his sweetheart's apartment on West End Avenue. 150 police officers and detectives laid siege to his top-floor hideaway. Chopping holes in the roof, they tried to smoke out Crowley, the cop killer, with tear gas. Then they mounted their machine guns on surrounding buildings, and for more than an hour one of New York's fine residential sections reverberated with the crack of pistol fire and the rat-a-tat of machine guns. Crowley, crouching behind an overstuffed chair, fired incessantly at the police. 10,000 excited people watched the battle. Nothing like it had ever been seen before on the sidewalks of New York. When Crowley was captured, Police Commissioner Mulrooney declared that the Twogan Desperado was one of the most dangerous criminals ever encountered in the history of New York. He will kill, said the commissioner, at the drop of a feather. But how did Twogan Crowley regard himself? We know, because while the police were firing into his apartment, he wrote a letter addressed to whom it may concern. And as he wrote, the blood flowing from his wounds left a crimson rail on the paper. In this letter Crowley said, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one own, that would do nobody any harm." A short time before this, Crowley had been having a necking party on a country road out on Long Island. Suddenly a police officer walked up to the parked car and said, "Let me see your license." Without saying a word, Crowley drew his gun and cut the police officer down with a shower of lead. As the dying officer fell, Crowley leapt out of the car, grabbed the officer's revolver, and fired another bullet into the prostrate body. And that was the killer who said, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one own, that would do nobody any harm." Crowley was sentenced to the electric chair. When he arrived at the death house at Sing Sing, did he say, "This is what I get for killing people"? No, he said, "This is what I get for defending myself." Lesson 31. 321. The point of the story is this: Twogan Crowley didn't blame himself for anything. Is that an unusual attitude among criminals? If you think so, listen to this. I have spent the best years of my life giving people the lighter pleasures, helping them have a good time, and all I get is abuse, the existence of a hunted man. Phil Cy Capone speaking. Yes, America's erstwhile public enemy number one, by most sinister gang leader who ever shot up Chicago. Capone doesn't condemn himself. He actually regards himself as a public benefactor, unappreciated and misunderstood public benefactor. And so did Dutch Schultz before he crumpled up under gangster bullets in Newark. Dutch Schultz, one of New York's most notorious rats, said in a newspaper interview that he was a public benefactor. And he believed it. I have had some interesting correspondence with Warden Laws of Sing Sing on this subject, and he declares that few of the criminals in Sing Sing regard themselves as bad men. They are just as human as you and I. So they rationalize, they explain. They can tell you why they had to crack a safe or be quick on the trigger finger. Most of them attempt by a form of reasoning, fallacious or logical, to justify their antisocial acts, even to themselves, consequently stoutly maintaining that they should never have been imprisoned at all. H.I. Capone, Twogan Crowley, Dutch Schultz, the desperate men behind prison walls don't blame themselves for any thought about the people with whom you and I come in contact. The late John Wanamaker once confessed, "I learned 30 years ago that it is foolish to scold." I'll have enough trouble overcoming my own limitations without fretting over the fact that God has not seen fit to distribute evenly the gift of intelligence. Wanamaker learned this lesson early, but I personally had to blunder through this old world for a third of a century before it even began to dawn upon me that 99 times out of 100, no man ever criticizes himself for anything, no matter how wrong he may be. Criticism is futile because it puts a man on the defensive and usually makes him strive to justify himself. Criticism is dangerous because it wounds a man's precious pride, hurts his sense of importance, and arouses his resentment. The German army won't let a soldier file a complaint and make a criticism immediately after a thing has happened. He has 322. Semester 7. To sleep on his grudge first and cool off. If he files his complaint immediately, he is punished. By the eternals, there ought to be a law like that in civil life, to a law for whining parents and nagging wives and scolding employers and the whole obnoxious parade of fault-funders. You will find examples of the futility of criticism bristling on 1,000 pages of history. Take, for example, the famous quarrel between Theodore Roosevelt and President Taft, a quarrel that split the Republican Party, put Woodrow Wilson in the White House, and wrote bold, luminous lines across the World War, and altered the flow of history. Let's review the facts quickly. When Theodore Roosevelt stepped out of the White House in 1918, he made Taft president, and then went off to Africa to shoot lions. When he returned, he exploded. He denounced Taft for his conservatism, tried to secure the nomination for a third term himself, formed the Bull Moose Party, and all but demolished the GOP. In the election that followed, William Howard Taft and the Republican Party carried only to states of Vermont and Utah, the most disastrous defeat the old party had ever known. Theodore Roosevelt blamed Taft, but did President Taft blame himself? Of course not. With tears in his eyes, Taft said, "I don't see how I could have done any differently from what I have." Who was to blame, Roosevelt or Taft? Frankly, I don't know, and I don't care. The point I am trying to make is that all of Theodore Roosevelt's criticism didn't persuade Taft that he was wrong. It merely made Taft strive to justify himself and to reiterate, with tears in his eyes, "I don't see how I could have done any differently from what I have." Or take the Teapot Dome oil scandal. Remember it. It kept the newspapers ringing with indignation for years. It rocked the nation. Nothing like it had ever happened before in American public life within the memory of living men. Here are the bare facts of the scandal. Albert Fall, Secretary of the Interior in Harding's cabinet, was entrusted with the leasing of government oil reserves at Elk Hill and Teapot Dome reserves that had been set aside for the future use of the Navy. Did Secretary Fall permit competitive bidding? No, sir. He handed the fat, juicy contract outright to his friend, Edward Doheny. And what did Doheny do? He gave Secretary Fall what he was pleased to call a loan of $100,000. Then, in a high-end manner, Secretary Fall ordered United States Marines into the district to drive off competitors whose adjacent wells were sapping oil out of the Elk Hill reserves. These competitors, driven off their ground at the ends of guns and bayonets, rushed into court and blew the Lesson 31. 323. Lit off the $100 million Teapot Dome scandal. A stench arose so vile that it Rue and the Harding administration, nauseated an entire nation, threatened to wreck the Republican Party and put Albert B. Fall behind prison bars. Fall was condemned vicious-stolmanned as few men in public life have ever been. Did he repent? Never. Years later, Herbert Hoover intimated in a public speech that President Harding's death had been due to mental anxiety and worry because a friend had betrayed him. When Mrs. Fall heard that, she sprang from her chair, she wept, she shook her fists at fate, and screamed, "What? Harding betrayed by Fall? No. My husband never betrayed anyone. This whole house full of gold would not tempt my husband to do wrong. He is the one who has been betrayed and led to the slaughter and crucified." There you are, human nature in action, the wrongdoer blaming Gordicaine but himself. We are all like that. So when you and I are tempted to criticize someone tomorrow, let's remember Al Capone, Twogan Crowley, and Albert Fall. Let's realize that criticisms are like homing pigeons. They always return home. Let's realize that the person we are going to correct and condemn will probably justify himself and condemn us in return, or like the gentle Taft, he will say, "I don't see how I could have done any different from what I have." On Saturday morning, April 15, 1865, Abraham Lincoln lay dying in a hall bedroom of a cheap lodging house directly across the street from Ford's Theater, where Booth had shot him. Lincoln's long body lay stretched diagonally across a sagging bed that was too short for him. A cheap reproduction of Rosamond Hoar's famous painting, The Horse Fair, hung above the bed, and a dismal gas jet flickered yellow light. As Lincoln lay dying, Secretary of War Stanton said, "There lies the most perfect ruler of men that the world has ever seen." What was the secret of Lincoln's success in dealing with men? I studied the life of Abraham Lincoln for 10 years, and devoted all of 3 years to writing and rewriting a book entitled Lincoln the Unknown. I believe I have made as detailed and exhaustive a study of Lincoln's personality and home life as it is possible for any human being to make. I made a special study of Lincoln's method of dealing with men. Did he indulge in criticism? Oh, yes. As a young man in the Pigeon Creek Valley of Indiana, he not only criticized, but he wrote letters and poems ridiculing people and dropped these letters on the country roads where they were sure to be found. One of these letters aroused resentments that burned for a lifetime. In 324 Semester 7, even after Lincoln had become a practicing lawyer in Springfield, Deloney's, he attacked his opponents openly in letters published in the newspapers. But he did this just once too often. In the autumn of 1842, he ridiculed a vain, pugnacious Irish politician by the name of James Shields. Lincoln lampooned him through an anonymous letter published in the Springfield Journal. The town roared with laughter. Shields, sensitive and proud, boiled with indignation. H. found out who wrote the letter, leapt on his horse, started after Lincoln, and challenged him to fight a duel. Lincoln didn't want to fight. He was opposed to dueling, but he couldn't get out of it and save his honor. He was given the choice of weapons. Since he had very long arms, he chose cavalry, broadswords, took lessons in sword fighting from a West Point graduate, and on the appointed day, he and Shields met on a sand bar in the Mississippi River, prepared to fight to the death, but at the last minute, 10 seconds interrupted and stopped the duel. That was the most lurid personal incident in Lincoln's life. It taught him an invaluable lesson in the art of dealing with people. Never again did he write an insulting letter. Never again did he ridicule anyone. And from that time on, he almost never criticized anybody for anything. Time after time, during the Civil War, Lincoln put a new general at the head of the Army of the Potomac, and each one in Tecumseh, Pope, Burnside, Hooker, made a blunder tragically and drove Lincoln to pacing the floor in despair. Hanuf, the nation, savagely condemned these incompetent generals, but Lincoln, with malice towards none, with charity for all, held his peace. One of his favorite quotations was, "Judge not, that ye be not judged." And when Mrs. Lincoln and others spoke harshly of the Salmable, Lincoln replied, "Don't criticize them, they are just what we would be under similar circumstances." Yet if any man ever had occasion to criticize, surely it was Lincoln. Let's take just one illustration. Battle of Gettysburg was fought during the first 3 days of July 1863. During the night of July 4, Lee began to retreat southward while storm clouds deluged the country with rain. When Lee reached the Potomac with his defeated army, he found a swollen, impassable river in front of him and a victorious Union army behind him. Lee was in a trap. He couldn't escape. Lincoln saw that. Here was a golden, heaven-sent opportune opportunity to capture Lee's army and end the war immediately. So, with a surge of high hope, Lincoln ordered Meade not to call a council of war, but to attack Lee immediately. Lincoln telegraphed Lesson 31. 325. His orders, and then sent a special messenger to Meade demanding immediate action. And what did General Meade do? He did the very opposite of what he was told to do. He called a council of war in direct violation of Lincoln's orders. He hesitated. He procrastinated. He telegraphed all manner of excuses. He refused point-blank to attack Lee. Finally, the waters receded and Lee escaped over the Potomac with his forces. Lincoln was furious. What does this mean? Lincoln cried to his son Robert, "Great God, what does this mean? We had them within our grasp, and had only to stretch forth our hands, and they were ours, yet nothing that I could say or do could make the army move. Under the circumstances, almost any general could have defeated Lee. If I had gone up there, I could have whipped him myself." In bitter disappointment, Lincoln sat down and wrote Meade this letter. And remember, at this period of his life he was extremely conservative and resplendent in his phraseology. So this letter coming from Lincoln in 1863 was tantamount to the severest rebuke. "My dear General, I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of the misfortune involved in Lee's escape. He was within our easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would, in connection with our other late successes, have ended the war. As it is, the war will be prolonged indefinitely. If you could not safely attack Lee last Monday, how can you possibly do so south of the river, when you can take with you very few no more than 2/3 of the force you then had in hand? It would be unreasonable to expect, and I do not expect that you can now effect much. Your golden opportunity is gone, and I am distressed immeasurably because of it. What do you suppose Meade did when he read that letter? Meade never saw the letter. Lincoln never mailed it. It was found among Lincoln's papers after his death. My guess is, and this is only a guess, hot after writing that letter, Lincoln looked out of the window and said to himself, just a minute. Maybe I ought not to be so hasty. It is easy enough for Meade to sit here in the quiet of the White House and order Meade to attack, but if I had been up at Gettysburg, and if I had seen as much blood as Meade has seen during the last week, and if my ears had been pierced with the screams and shrieks of the wounded and dying, maybe I wouldn't be so anxious to attack either. If I had Meade's timid temperament, perhaps I would have done just what 326. Semester 7, he has done anyhow. It is water under the bridge now. If I send this letter, it will relieve my feelings, but it will make Meade try to justify himself. It will make him condemn me. It will arouse hard feelings, impair all his further usefulness as a commander, and perhaps force him to resign from the army. So, as I have already said, Lincoln put the letter aside, for he had learned by bitter experience that sharp criticisms and rebukes almost invariably end in futility. Theodore Roosevelt said that when he, as president, was confronted with some perplexing problem, he used to lean back and look up at a large painting of Lincoln that hung above his desk in the White House and ask himself, what would Lincoln do if he were in my shoes? How would he solve this problem? The next time we are tempted to give somebody Hail Columbia, let's pull E5 olive bill out of our pocket, look at Lincoln's picture on the bill, and ask, how would Lincoln handle this problem if he had it? Do you know someone you would like to change and regulate and improve? Good. That is fine. I am all in favor of it. But why not begin on yourself? From a purely selfish standpoint, that is a lot more profitable than trying to improve other size, and a lot less dangerous. When a man's fight begins within himself, said Browning, he is worth something. It will probably take from now until Christmas to perfect yourself. You can then have a nice long rest over the holidays and devote the new year to regulating and criticizing other people. But perfect yourself first. Don't complain about the snow on your neighbor's roof, said Confucius, when your own doorstep is unclean. When I was still young and trying to impress people, I wrote a foolish letter to Richard Harding Davis, an author who once loomed large on the literary horizon of America. I was preparing a magazine article about authors, and I asked Davis to tell me about his method of work. A few weeks earlier, I had received a letter from someone with this notation at the bottom, dictated but not read. I was quite impressed. I felt the writer must be very big and busy and important. I was the slightest bit busy, but I was eager to make an impression on Richard Harding Davis, so I ended my short note with the words dictated but not read. He never troubled to answer the letter. He simply returned it to me with this scribbled across the bottom: your bad manners are exceeded only by your bad manners. True, I had blundered. Lesson 31, 327. And perhaps I deserved his rebuke. But, being human, I resented it. I resented it so sharply that when I read of the death of Richard Harding Davis 10 years later, the one thought that still persisted in my mind, am ashamed to admit, is the hurt he had given me. If you and I want to stir up a resentment tomorrow that may rankle across the decades and endure until death, just let us indulge in a little stinging criticism, no matter how certain we are that it is justified. When dealing with people, let us remember we are not dealing with creatures of logic. We are dealing with creatures of emotion, creatures bristling with prejudices and motivated by pride and vanity. And criticism is a dangerous spark that is liable to cause an explosion in the powder magazine of pretty, an explosion that sometimes hastens death. For example, General Leonard Wood was criticized and not allowed to go with the army to France. That blow to his pride probably shortened his life. Bitter criticism caused the sensitive Thomas Hardy, one of the finest novelists that ever enriched English literature, to give up the writing of fiction forever. Criticism drove Thomas Chatterton, the English poet, to suicide. Benjamin Franklin, tactless in his youth, became so diplomatic, so adroit at handling people, that he was made United States ambassador to France. The secret of his success. I will speak ill of no man, he said, and speak all the good I know of everybody. Any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, it most fools do. But it takes character and self-control to be understanding and forgiving. A great man shows his greatness, said Thomas Carlyle, by the way he treats little men. Instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. As Dr. Johnson said, God himself, sir, does not croaks to judge man until the end of his days. Why should you and I, once you learn this valuable principle of success and use it, the results do amaze you. Robert Conklin, Lesson 32, How to Get People to Help You Succeed. You have just learned the value and importance of not criticizing others. In mules wounded by your careless words or acts, working and conspiring against you, will contribute nothing but harm to you and your career. Know how do you get others to pull with you instead of against you. How do you get them into your corner, cheering you on, urging you to victory? How do you get them to give you what you want without the use of force, fear, or manipulation? As a matter of fact, how do you get people to do anything you call other great truths? The answer is simple, so simple that we overlook it in our search for more sophisticated and complex answers to this problem of inducing others to give us what we want or to move in the direction that we desire. Coaches, sales, managers, executives, negotiates, supervisors, teachers, religious leaders, and yes, potential grope for that hot button and others that would make their task easier, while seminars on motivation abound throughout the land, expensive seminars, dispensing over 2 or 3-day period a technique which you will learn from a master in the next few minutes. Robert Conklin is an author, teacher, national known speaker, and chairman of the board of 2 companies. Thousands each year benefit from his many motivational programs, and this revealing lesson, taken from his excellent book, How to Get People to Do Things, can be worth several thousand times whatever you have. 329.33. Semester 7, expended to attend this university, provided you grasp the concept and use it every day. The achievement of success is never a solo performance, as those who have tried that route will confess. There is an easier and far better way to travel, and how far you go will depend, to a large degree, on how well you take this lesson to heart. As to the degree you give others what they want, they will give you what you want. It was Bill Stillwell from the Management Institute, University of Wisconsin, summing up at what a conference on motivation and persuasion. I seized a pencil and wrote down his statement. It was one of those rare, precious, profound chunks of insight that can change the course of one's existence. I wished I had learned its meaning years before. To the degree you give others what they want, they will give you what you want. That is the key to persuading, leading, motivating, selling, supervising, influencing, guiding other jesting people to do things for you. You can read all the books, take all the courses, spend thousands of hours pursuing the secrets of affecting the thoughts and behavior of others, and you will discover it can all be compressed into that one sentence. To the degree you give others what they want, they will give you what you want. It seems incredibly simple. Perhaps it is, if you really understand it. But few do. For there are some implications of the rule that you must know and apply before you can make it work for you. Otherwise, the principle seems to work in reverse. People resist you, act against you, do the things you do not want them to do. For instance, you must just give others what they want. Then they give you the things you want. Most people have that twisted around. A man says to himself, I would give my wife a box of candy if she would show me more affection. Lesson 32.33. An employer feels that an employee should get praise and recognition after putting forth some extra effort. You'll start having confidence in my kids when they get some decent grades in school, mutters a parent. I could be a lot warmer toward George if he weren't so cold and grouchy, Mud silently thinks. Ailsman tells the manager, wow, would I ever be excited if I cracked the Flanex account? These people have the formula backward. The man has to bring his wife the candy first, then he will get more affection. The employer must give praise and recognition first in order to bring forth the extra effort from the employee. The parent has to express confidence in the kids first, then they will start coming through with better grades. Maud has to warm up to George first, then the indifference and grumpiness of George will melt away. The salesman must generate excitement first, then the big, juicy sales will fall into place. So that's the way the law works. You first give others what they want, then they will give you what you want. Of course, it takes patience. And a few other things. Like knowing what it is people want. Well, get to that later. And knowing how to give them the things they want. Well, get to that later, too. And knowing what it is you want and what you're willing to give in order to get it. Well, get to that right now. Because if you want to manipulate and shuffle people around for your own satisfaction, if you want to inflate your own ego by gaining power over those who are vulnerable, if you are looking for tricky ways to maneuver people into buying things they don't need, if you feel the need to dominate or subdue others, perhaps even your own family, and are looking for psychological buttons to push to always get your own way, then you are wasting your time with me. This is not about getting, it's about giving, and loving, and succeeding. In fact, it's about becoming immensely successful. For, if you can get things done with people in joy and harmony, helping them grow and become more than they ever have been before, then you have one of the most treasured talents anyone can possess. The world needs you. It is waiting to reward you highly in material or emotional benefits to give you the things you want. 332. Semester 7. People go in the wrong directions. With a pathway so open and available, why not more people get on it to go where they want to go? It's probably because of a fork in the road. People are going to go in one of two directions. They are going to be concerned only with what they want, or else with what others want. One or the other. Their wants or those of others. Many are so blinded by their personal wants that they give very little thought to filling the needs of others. Mary knows what she wants from her husband, but what he wants never fully gets through to her. The foreman knows he wants those lug bolts tight, and as the body frame comes through the assembly line, but what does the one doing the tightening want? The parents know the way they want their children to grow up, but do they show as much concern for what the children want emotionally? That is, the salesman has a strong desire to sell the stove, but is almost afraid to ask about the prospect's wants, for fear the product won't fit. Paul feels that Jane does not love him the way he wants to be loved. Maybe it's because he has been blind to her wants and needs. The teacher wants that dull, sleepy-aged teenager to be more attentive, but what does the gawky young stalk of humanity want? Has enough regard been invested in that? And so it goes. Everyone wants something from someone else and becomes frustrated when it is not forthcoming. Do you know what often happens then? They start applying an upsubdued version of the rule. They try punishing people, just what people do not want, in an effort to get what they want. The air gets chilly when Mary doesn't get what she wants from Frank. The foreman chews out the lug bolt tightener. The parents scold, spank, and threaten when the children do not fit the mold. The salesman jabbers and desperately when it appears the prospect is lukewarm. Maybe Jane will shape up if I make her a little jealous, Paul reasons. And the T. Her threatens, shames, and disciplines in futile attempts to shake off the teenager's lethargy. So that's the story of the human being in a highly individual civilly. Divorces, splits in families, high job turnover, heavy, hearts-wasted careers, crumbled dreams, lonely lives soul-haunted by ineffective efforts to relate to other people. Lesson 32. 333. Find out what people want. Then help them get it. That's the way to reverse most of those distressing situations. It's another way of describing the rule, or the first part of it, that is to the degree you give others what they want. Change want to need. I have observed this process functioning successfully for a number of years. I am more dedicated to it and enthusiastic about it now than when I first heard it. The joys of my personal life have flowered from the use of it. The barren, rocky moments have resulted when my emotions got in the way of my using the rule. I would make only one change in the formula. Replace the word want with need. Wants and needs are separate substances. Wants are frivolous, itchy, plundering, often greedy forces that are never satisfied. Meet one want, and there are two more to replace it. But needs are the deeper currents of one's existence. They are meaningful, worthy, and not as capricious as wants. People want sympathy, they need empathy. People want riches, they need fulfillment. People want big cars and expensive homes, they need transportation and shelter. People want fame, they need recognition. People want power, they need support and cooperation. People want to dominate, they need influence and guide. People want prestige, they need respect. Children want freedom and permissiveness, they need discipline. People want Machiavelli relationships, they need honesty and reality. People want ease and comfort, they need achievement and work. People want adoration, they need love. So let's say, to the degree you give others what they need, they will give you what you need. Let's think about that. What do people really need? What do you and I really need? To discover that, we must become rather close. But we can do that. For there are few relationships more intimate than that of author and reader. The relationship is silento verbal interruptions, no detours. It's a very private conversation between two. 334. Semester 7. People, nevermore. The author, if sincere, is speaking from the heart in a way most understandable to the reader. The reader can reject, accept, pause, ponder, reread, react in any way he or she chooses without any of the risks accompanying other types of communication. It's a warm and wonderful association. I, for one, am going to enjoy the reward of it. I hope you do, too. I would like to be your friend. That means I must open up and disclose myself to you. When I do that, you will not only know me, but you will also get to know yourself a lot better. And others. This is called relating. That's how you will discover what others need so that you can apply our formula. To the degree you give others what they need, they will give you what you need. Relate. Open up. Remove your mask, and others will remove theirs. Knowing me is knowing you. Let me remove my mask. You will see what I mean. For as I talk of myself and the things I need, you will discover that I am also talking about you and the things you need. You'll begin by saying, love me. Give me someone as I wander through life who cares about Messamone, who picks me out of the crowd, notices me, remembers me, makes me believe him special. This is the plea churning about within every human being. It is the greatest hunger of life. Love is the mainspring of the heart. It is the meaning, the joy, the valleys and the mountains of being. Love freshens the body, nourishes the soul, shapes the spirit, and glorifies the mind. It is the laughter of the heart, the sunrise of each moment. Above all else, love is an emotion. That's why it is so vital to the pulse of life, for people are emotional beings. Everything they do is shaped by their emotions. I wish I could tell you more about emotions, classify them, establish them in the order of their intensity, and find words to make them completely understandable. But that would be a little like trying to describe what a mushroom tastes like. It is impossible. I only know about my feelings, not yours. We can never know exactly how another person feels. I can laugh with you in your laughter, cry with you in your sorrow, rejoice with you in your happiness, or fret with you in your despair. I is empathy. But neither of us can feel exactly the same way the other feels. Lesson 32, 335. Only you know about your feelings, and only I know about mine. And neither of us are even too clear about that. But if we can talk to each other about our inner selves, well, be able to compare, understand, and accept who we are significantly better. And that will help us in getting along with each other and the people close to us. So I'll tell you about my feelings, and maybe that will aid you to see yours more clearly. We never really grow up. A large part of my emotional direction was established very early in life. The longer I live, the more impressed I am about that. Now that I am a seasoned adult, it seems I should have outgrown my childhood nature. But I haven't. I know now I won't. My childhood was a struggle to receive friendship, acceptance, love, and recognition. Just like chickens, a pecking order was established in the flock of children. Who was the smartest, funniest, strongest, cutest, or more popular? Who could run the fastest, throw a stone the farthest, hold their breath the longest, or win the most marbles? I sure didn't end up on top. But the great mass of other kids were there with me, reacting about as I did. At that age, one doesn't talk about feelings of inadequacy or inferiority. So at times, it seemed as though I were alone, separated from the whole world. Like striking an already bruised muscle, criticism, rejection, failure, or rebuke intensified this conviction. I would not let this be found out because it seemed shameful, a sign of weakness, for perhaps that I didn't deserve to be on the top of the heap. I hung on dearly to every indication of love or recognition. Like the comment of Jenny Murphy, my 8th grade English teacher, who suggested I could write. You're a little like Abraham Lincoln, she said. D. You say a lot in a few words. A moment later, she revealed that she knew I was one of the boys who had tipped over her outhouse on Halloween. What a magnificent personal! She was the only teacher throughout my 16 years of school who said anything good about my academic ability. J. It wondered that at times I had a complex about being a bit backward and dumb, without question quite average intellectually. I suppose the acorn never stops needing the earth, the moisture, and the air, even after it becomes a grown tree. So here I am, an adult, and find I have changed so very little in my needs since those long ago days. 336, Semester 7, I still seek recognition and acceptance. I still flourish with praise and crumble with criticism and rejection. At times I still feel an ill in it when I'm alone or with someone I know but when I am surrounded by strangers. In a crowded shopping center, for instance, I feel awkward, distant from everyone else. People stare at me not as a human being, it seems, but as a thing. I want a friendly face to look into, meet eyes that say hello rather than don't come near me. Perhaps that is why a warm welcome and a smile is so pleasing from one who serves me in a store. It relieves, for a moment, a loneliness. There are short spaces when I have a strong yearning to be loved. I do not mean physical love, although that is important. I refer to the communication of emotional love. These spans of longing usually come after I have been heavily involved with people for long periods of time. It is almost like wanting a recess, a coffee break, a point of surrender from the process of living. I want to know that all the effort, the trying to be loved, gets some results. I must go to someone who cares about me and merely be in that person's presence quietly and effortlessly and be fulfilled with the sense of being loved. So I have found that most of the things I want from living I must get from people. It would simplify life to be able to say that I don't need others, that I can exist only with my God, my work, running in the morning, paddling my canoe among the water lilies in the bay, looking at mountain peaks, or just being alone. I enjoy those things deeply and peacefully, but my life would be shallow if that were all I had. I want to tell someone about my experiences. I must share myself with people. I have much yet to accomplish with my life. This requires the help of others. I need people to notice me, encourage me, accept me, praise me, and care about me. You might say, but you have all of those. Don't you know that? And I would respond, yes, I know that logically. You've been around a long time, so I know you are my friend. You married me, you work with me, you fill my car with gas, or you play golf with me. So I know you must be my friend. But I do not know it emotionally unless you communicate it, and I experience it. If you love me, touch me. If you like being with me, smile at me. If you miss me, write to me. Then my feelings as well as my mind will know of our love and friendship. You will be helping me. For the energy of my life is my emotion. Lesson 32, 337, that is the substance that stimulates me to achieve, grow, work, progress, and become more than one was yesterday. And when you do this for me, then I'm a little like a puppy, dog. Stroke me, show me affection, and 111 wag my tail, jump up and down, follow you around, and do the things you ask me to do. But your strokes and affection must be real. For, like the little dog, one can tell if Juddy is. If your attention is a false device to manipulate me, it'll find you out and resist you. Are we similar? It is not easy for me to disclose myself this way. We are alike, you and I, in that respect. We hide our real selves from the world. We keep our insecurities, doubts, weaknesses, and needs under cover. Perhaps we are saying, I don't want you to give me the things one need because one have asked for them. One don't want your pity and charity. One want your love and respect. So we conceal our deepest longings, making sure we earn that which we hope for from others. Maybe that's all right. At any rate, that's the way it is. So why do one bother going through this unnatural process? Because one don't believe you are very much different from me. We may have traveled separate paths to get this way. Our emotional temperatures might vary, but beneath the surface we are really quite alike. We yearn to be needed, wanted, and loved. We want to be important to someone. We need appreciation, satisfaction, recognition, acceptance, fulfillment, and a whole lot of other things that we reach out for from within. Most others are like you and me. Remember, to the degree you give others what they need, they will give you what you need. What do others need? Look well within yourself, and you will find that which exists in others. What you need, they need. What is closest to your heart, emotionally, is also closest to theirs. You are your own barometer, your own measuring Debbie, of what you need to give in order to get what you need from life. You take out what you put in, You now have the key for getting people to do things for you. It's simple, isn't it? That's as I should be. It resembles the natural, core soul of. You were born into a sea of life, existing in harmony with all others. You usually do things best when you do them with others in cooperation, mutual trust, joy, and satisfaction. The principles are so easy that a child can use them. Regard. 338. Semester 7. Less of your personality. You have the capacity to get along better with people only by giving and sharing of yourself. This calls to mind the man in a desolate mountain region, who was a laborer 6 days a week and a preacher on the 7th. He served a small rural congregation tucked far up in the hills. The only monetary compensation he got came from the morning offering. One Sunday his 6-year-old daughter went along with him to the service. Just inside the door of a small frame church was a table, and on it rested a collection basket. As they entered, the daughter saw her father place a half-a-offer in the wicker basket before any of the people arrived. When the service had ended and the last member had departed, the parson and his daughter started to leave. As they reached the door, both peered expectantly into the collection basket and found that the only take was the half-a-offer he had donated. After a short silence, the little girl said, "You know, Daddy, if you had put more in, you'd have gotten more out. Here are 7 keys that will free you from the cage of a dull, passive, and complying existence so that the tiger within you can begin to assert itself." Nina George O'Neill, Lesson 33, How to Take Charge of Your Youth. You have only one life to live. Are you living it with self-respect, with purpose, with a edgy for continued growth, or are you little more than a live marionette with others pulling your strings? Sheep, for self-respiration, always remain with their herd. Any desire for adventure or exploration, or even food and water, is instinctively suppressed by the knowledge that danger lurks beyond the protective circle of the group. Why do so many of us act as if we were sheep? Why do we abandon the management of our lives to others while we stumble forlornly through each day, waiting only for the next command to jump or bow or perform for our supper? Whenever we allow others to control our lives, we place our future in their hands. We abdicate our right to make choices beneficial to us, and we stifle all opportunity for growth. With no goals, no priorities, no life strategy of our own, we drift with the herd through an endless meadow of mediocrity, unable to break loose, to achieve even a small part of the dreams we once cherished. Such a condition is bleak but curable. You can learn how to manage your own life, to establish and pursue your own goals, to leave the herd far behind. You can learn how to take a stand for yourself, to say no instead of yes, to act instead of being acted upon. You are not a sheep, nor are you lost. Any control over yourself that you have relinquished can be retrieved so that you are 339-34. Semester 7, in command of your own destiny again. Pay close attention. 2 distinguished authors and anthropologists, Nina and George O'Neill, are about to help you restore your dignity and your individuality in this provocative lesson from their book, Shifting Gears. If we do not rise to the challenge of our unique capacity to shape our own lives, to seek the kinds of growth that we find individually fulfilling, then we can have no security we will live in a world of sham, in which ourselves are determined by the will of others, in which we will be constantly buffeted and increasingly insulated by the changes around us. Without choice, we can have no direction. Without a life strategy that is our own, we lose our sense of self, for never find it, and become a cipher, a nothing. As Jules Henry, the anthropologist, has commented, for when a man is nothing, he lives only by impacts from the outer world. He is a creature external to himself, a surface of fear moved by the winds of circumstance, one circumstance colliding with another. 'Tis the ebb and flow of thought. Or he is a cyclone of fear in which impulses from the outer world collide at random. When we live a life of sham, Jules Henry goes on to say, we do not consider reality, but only try to defeat it. The reality of the world around us, including the impact of change, is something we must meet. If we are to grow, cannot capitulate to it, we cannot abdicate the making of choices. The only way we can prevent ourselves from being overwhelmed and counteract the forces around us is to find our own center, to believe in ourselves, to ignore the conflicting voices around us, to listen to our inner voices. It is only then that we can truly interact with the outside world with courage, conviction, and meaning. The consequence of letting change happen without our active involvement is abdication to the tyranny of external control, both in a societal and an individual sense. When we lose our individual autonomy, and our freedom of choice, then frustration, isolation, aggression, and violence are the result. If you do not manage yourself, then by default either circumstances or other people will manage you. What modem man needs is not faith in the traditional sense of that term, as philosopher Maurice Friedman has said, but a life-stained sour italics, a ground on which to stand, and from which to go out to meet the ever-changing realities. And Lesson 33. 341. Absurdities of a technic age. Our life stances. The personal and social ground that might enable us to withstand bureaucratic attain and surveillance innumerable incursions of military, industrial, ecological, economic, and political forces into our personal lives. In order to clarify our individual life stance, to find ourselves and what we believe in and stand for, we need to know not only about the guidelines to a life strategy for change and growth, but also how to integrate those guidelines and put them to work for us. And an understanding of self-manifestation can help us to carry out this integration of the life strategy. Taking a stand for yourself, taking a stand in life, a stand for yourself, is integral to shifting gears to growing through self-destruct change. There are 7 keys to creative self-manifestation that can help you to develop a stand in life. 1. Don't ask permission. 2. Don't report. 3. Don't apologize unnecessarily. 4. Don't recriminate yourself. 5. Don't say I should or I do it. Check things out with yourself, not others. This is telling others you are self-demission. The misidentity syndrome keeps you from moving forward. Ask why, or why not. Schulten. 6. Don't be afraid to say no or yes. 7. Don't put yourself complete. Act on what you think and feel. Be a self-determined. Lie in the hands of another. Each of these keys is a negative because it is necessary to counteract our too frequent capitulation to cultural and social dicta that insist upon our conformity, that tells us security lies in being like other people instead of fulfilling our individual needs through continuing growth. But this negative cast doesn't mean that we must forsake others or fail to take others into account. The truth is, we can have understanding and consideration for others only to the extent that we ourselves are strong. If we are ciphers ruled by others, then we have nothing to give others. It is only when we begin to manage our own change that we can truly give ourselves, in a caring and sharing way, give to another or to a project. Or 342. Semester 7. Situation out of our feelings of independence, self-reation, and security, not out of self-demissions and weakness. A corollary to these keys is be kind to yourself. Few of us can reach a compassionate kindness for others unless we can be kind to ourselves first. These keys make it possible for us to change and grow creatively. It is true, of course, that by saying no, by not asking permission, we may lose old friends, but if our friendships are based upon our weaknesses rather than our strengths, how good are they for us? With new strength we will make new friends who are themselves strong. We find it necessary to hurt someone else in order to determine our own lives. What it really means is that we are no longer willing to let them hurt us, no longer willing to let them prevent us from realizing ourselves. Once we stop letting others hurt us, it becomes possible out of our new strength to give and to help them because we care. We can then more easily accept without feeling hurt or rejected when others say no to us. When we have begun to take charge of our lives, to own ourselves, there is no longer any need to ask permission of someone. There is another person who will be affected by what you are going to do. Then you can ask how the other feels about what you intend to do. Ask for feedback from him or her and then utilize this new information in your decision-making. Listening to these feelings and taking them into consideration is important, but it is not the same thing as asking permission. To ask permission is to give someone else veto power over your life. On the other hand, to ask for feedback is to gather information that can be balanced against your own needs, your own values. Knowing your values and acting upon them means that you have become your own person, your own boss, your own mentor. It does not, however, mean a lack of concern about others and your responsibilities to them or for them. We can explain to others the why of our decisions and actioners our impulsive and thoughtless mistakes. We should do it because we care for others, not because we feel controlled by them. When we explain to them, we are in fact complimenting them, treating them as people of a maturity equal to we own. Other people do not or cannot accept our authentic explanations of our decisions or actions because of problems of their own. They do not deserve an apology in the first place. Explanations, yes, but apologies, no. If they measure our worth only by how closely we conform to what they want us to do, they are really asking us to be worth nothing to ourselves. Such people are not themselves mature, and their objections to our steps toward maturity simply are not valid. Lesson 33, 343. Once you are able to accept responsibility for your actions and can explain your reasons for these actions to other people, once you are able to examine the positive and negative aspects of yourself and by so doing begin to find your path toward change, then other people must also accept your authenticity in this regard. Otherwise they show themselves to be diminishers, people whose sense of their own worth is dependent on your being less mature, less sure of your worth than they are of theirs. You can demonstrate no higher regard for other people, in the end, than by caring for them enough to tell them the truth about your needs. Some people will undoubtedly misuse the rules for self-maintainment we have outlined, misapplying them in the service of what currently but erroneously passes for being true to oneself, hating it all, hang out, doing one's own thing without regard for others. You don't owe an explanation to others, but if you are unable and unwilling to give one, you are not moving toward mature and creative change, but simply trying to escape from reality into a private fantasy in which it is no longer necessary for you to interact with the world and with the people around you. The psychologist Robert W. White notes that it is tempting to believe that we can change simply by opening a door and letting out true and sullied impulses, but to misuse our keys for self-maintainment in this way has not led to change. To quote again from White, change is never so simple. What is really involved is not the releasing of a true self, but the making of a new self, one that gradually transcends the limitations and pettiness of the old. This can only be done by behaving differently when interacting with other people. New strategies have to be evolved that express the new intentions and encourage others to take their reciprocal part in finer human relations. The keys for self-maintainment we have developed are a tool, then, a new strategy for dealing with others that allows us to express our own needs despite the cultural inhibitions against doing so. These keys express a new intention, and when they are accompanied by a compassionate explanation for our actions, they can indeed encourage others to take their reciprocal part in creative change. But just as it is important that you don't ask permission, that you check things out with yourself rather than reporting to others for instruction, and that you don't apologize unnecessarily, it is also important not to recriminate yourself about past failures. Apologies to yourself are really the basis of the self-diminishance, 344, Semester 7, that leads to apologizing to others. If you spend time in self-examining, full be remorse over the past and the missed opportunities in your life, you are not managing yourself, but letting the past manage you. Your past holds as many potential half-steps toward the future as it does missed opportunities. Mine your past for what is useful, learn from your mistakes, and remember that nothing's wasted. When you say, I should do this, or I shouldn't do that, you are also in many cases allowing yourself to be trapped by the past, following rules set down by parents, teachers, or other mentors that may no longer have real meaning for you in our crisis culture. Many of our society's traditional mores, the shoulds and shouldness that have been handed down from one generation to another, are eminently worth preserving, but many others make sense only in terms of a kind of society that no longer exists. In order to live in the present, to move into the future, and to make the most of ourselves as individuals, we have to begin to make distinctions between the shoulds and shouldness that make sense in terms of today's world and those that do not. When you find yourself saying, I should, ask yourself, why? When you find yourself saying, I shouldn't, ask yourself, why not? If you can't come up with an answer that makes sense in terms of you and your needs for growth and fulfillment, then it is obviously time to discard that rule from the past. It may also be time to say no. You can say no to a rule from the past that no longer applies. You can also say no to a new development in our society that you personally find unfruited and not in tune with your inner self. You can even say no to change if that is what you want. Just as there are holdovers from the past that make no sense to us as individuals, so will there be current changes that make no sense. The same woman may find herself in the position of saying no to her mother's dictum that abortions are sinful, and also saying no to the neighboring couple who are into group sex. But as she says no to her mother and to her neighbors, this woman will also be defining more exactly the things she can say yes to. Once we have learned to say no, we can give ourselves permission to say yes to the things we really want. In dealing successfully with the option glut, you will want to say no quite often. No extraneous diversions, false expectations to excessive demands from others, to the people, the circumstances, the obligations that give you a sense of being trapped and frustrated. But the other side of that coin is to be able to say yes, fully and openly, to the people and circumstances that count for you. Lesson 33, 345. The final key to creative self-manifestation is the cardinal one: never put yourself completely into the hands of one holder. All of us need advice, support, encouragement, and help from others, but only as a means of strengthening our own self-support. The responsible therapist does not manage his patient's life, but is there only to act as a significant and caring catalyst in the discovery of self and in implementing positive change. In a complex existence, one needs the help of others who have expertise in their own specialties. We must depend upon airline pilots and surgeons and presidents for our very existence at certain times, but the ultimate control of our life management should and can be ours as individuals. The difference between putting ourselves completely in the hands of others and retaining some personal control is the difference between the woman who says yes immediately to a major operation which may later turn out to have been unnecessary, and the woman who, in the face of this major decision, checks one doctor's opinion with a few others, considers the risks, gets all the relevant information, and then makes her decision, a decision she feels is right for her based on the information she has acquired. You can't sit up on the operating table and give the doctor instructions, but you can make sure beforehand that you are following the wisest possible course of action. That is the essence of self-management. The development of self-management techniques allows you to have self-constructal control of yourself in relation to the world should not be confused with holding things under control. The rigidly conforming person who fears anything new, who insists upon making his decisions according to preset patterns, and who fears losing control is not managing himself. He does not have self-control, but rather is being controlled by all the external forces, edicts, and expectations which he has internalized. You cannot control circumstance or other people, but you can control yourself. You can manage and direct behavior in response to circumstance and other people. Self-management leads to the finding of new directions, to a fresh sense of freedom within the limits of responsibility that true freedom entails. The person who tries to hold things under control in a negative way, who tries to make circumstance and other people fit a performed mold, is like the man who goes into a Chinese restaurant and always orders all his dishes from Kalama. The person who practices self-management, who retains the power of decision in himself, who asks why and why not, who acts on what he really thinks and feels, has the choice of ordering not only from Kalama, but from columns B and C as well, or entirely from 346. Semester 7. One column if that is what he wants and finds best for himself at any given point. Or he can choose to walk out of the restaurant without ordering too. The person who tries to hold things under control in a negative way is taking a prepackaged tour of life. This, if it's Tuesday it must be Belgium's syndrome, leads him to say if M45 be home safe. But if the tour bus breaks down or he finds that he is not home safe at Fortitude, he is completely at the mercy of circumstance, as well as having missed out on much of life's varied excitement and much of his own potential when things don't go as expected. For the person who practices self-management, on the other hand, that individual has the resources to adjust his plans, to take the new circumstances into account and move forward from there. All kinds of adversities can be turned into advantage if we are willing to take our integral part in making them so. By managing ourselves, we come to know more completely what we want for ourselves. We come to know our priorities, our needs, our wants far more clearly, and this knowledge inevitably brings a greater sense not only of freedom but of security. The person who knows himself or herself and manages his or her life can tolerate a higher level of ambiguity than before, can deal more successfully with anxiety and conflict because he is sure of his own capabilities. Such people can enjoy change, can improvise confidently in unknown situations. As the psychologist Abraham Maslow suggests, such people can face tomorrow without fear because, whatever it may bring, they have the confidence of self-oblivion. Self-oblivion is eroded every time we put ourselves completely in another's hands, every time we ask permission or report to others or apologize unnecessarily. Self-oblivion is increased every time we ask ourselves, rather than others, what we should do with our lives. Self-made instant bolsters the meaning and the value of the self, and a fuller sense of self-worth and of self-acceptance is the result. If your energy is as boundless as your ambition, total commitment may be a way of life you should seriously consider. Dr. Joyce Brothers, Lesson 34, How to Find Success in the Fast Lane. Let's face it, whenever a very successful individual is asked for the secret of his or her success and that person replies, hard work, we usually can't help wondering what the real secret is behind their good fortune. Was it a lucky break, a rich relative, some crafty manipulation perhaps, which accounts for that man or woman's great wealth, fame, or power? Questions such as this may comfort our own sagging ego, but they also blind us to the truth, and the truth, in most cases, is that when high achievers say they accomplished their objectives with hard work, they mean it. But you work hard too, don't you? And yet you don't drive a Rolls or have a summer home in Acapulco. However, your definition of work is probably 40 to 50 hours of your best effort each week, with dinners at home and weekends spent in fun and relaxation. When high achievers use the term hard work, they mean working at top capacity for 70 or 80 hours or more every week, loving their work until it becomes a driving passion, and devoting all their waking hours to thinking, planning, and striving toward goals which others consider impossible. Total commitment is not a recommended lifestyle for everyone. For many, the price it extracts is much too high, but there are also countless thousands who know exactly what they want and are willing to give as much of themselves as necessary in order to succeed. If you feel that way, more power to you. And Dr. Brothers, 347, 348, Semester 7, in this lesson from her book, How to Get Whatever You Want Out of Youth, will provide you with invaluable information on how to play the game of total commitment as skillfully as anyone. Are you willing to work hard in order to succeed? To go Eliot. To sacrifice certain pleasures because your time and energy must be devoted to your goal. Will you be happy to make these sacrifices? The answer is yes. You want to go all out, then you are right on target. You have found the right goal for the inner you. However, you think you will begrudge giving up evenings to work, and resent having to pass up weekend fun, then think again. You may not want to climb to the top of the ladder just partway. Your true goal probably lies elsewhere. People who succeed in business have the single-minded devotion to their goal that is best described as total commitment. Some people refer to these overworkers as workaholics, but that implies illness, and if you are doing what you want to do more than anything else in the world, why should you punish yourself by cutting down on the things that make you happy? Success in business does not necessarily preclude a happy marriage, but those men and women who want to go to the very top, who play for the highest stakes, often find that their total commitment leaves no room for marriage. On the other hand, those men, not women, who want what I call corporate success rather than entrepreneurial success should know that they will probably advance faster if they are married than if they are not. Psychologists retained by large corporations to test men and women being considered for promotion to executive ranks look for one quality more than any other. If the candidate has it that clinches the promotion, he doesn't, then he's out of the running. This pivotal quality is total commitment, the ability and desire to work to top capacity. They want people who scoff at 4-hour weeks, who work 6, 8, and 12-hour weeks because they find their work exciting and rewarding and they are seeking success. Total commitment is the common denominator among successful men and women. Its importance cannot be overestimated. Take Joe, for instance. Joe is an insurance salesman. He has been called the greatest insurance salesman in the business. Lesson 34, 349, His Secret. I put every ounce of energy into my work, he says. Right from the start, I worked 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. There just wasn't anything else that mattered. Everything that I do is associated with selling life insurance. When I started out, Joe says, I was told that if I called 75 people, I could expect to get 25 appointments, and that 10 of those 25 appointments would probably fall through, leaving me about 15, and I should be able to see 3 of those 15, and that would be a good week's work, they told me. I changed the numbers, he says. I call 75 people a day, not a week. I spend 5 and 6 hours on the phone, and I spend another 5 or 6 seeing people. The law of averages works. The more calls I make, the more sales I make. Successful men and women must have good health and boundless energy. Climbing to the top demands strength, whether it's to the top of Mount Everest or to the top of the Zigis Corporation. People are born with differing energy reserves, and the man or woman who tires fast, burns out easily would do well to reset his or her goals, or limit them. Instead of aiming to be chairman of an international multi-conglomerate, settle for being president of a small bakery chain or even owner of a neighborhood bakery. For the lower injury individual, succeeding in business could very well take the form of making it to department chief instead of president. These lesser goals are honorable and satisfying. The men and women who are content with a smaller degree of business success will have richer lives. They are the ones who have time to read and go to the theater, to go hiking with their children, to build strong family ties, to indulge in the joys of friendship, to nurture human values. But the others, those with boundless energy and ambition who want to soar to the top, do not see their total commitment as a sacrifice. To their way of thinking, they are gaining. They feel fulfilled and happy. Sarah Caldwell, the famed director of the opera company of Boston, is one of these. "I love what I do," she says. "I can work for days without sleep because I get so caught up with every detail of producing and conducting an opera. Once in a while, when everything is just right, there's a moment of magic. People can live on moments of magic." She was referring to moments of magic on the stage, everything comes together. Her business happens to be opera, and she is one of the handful of people who have made it to the 35. Semester 7, Pinnacle. But in every business there are moments of magic that people with total commitment experience, moments of magic that are the result of what psychologists refer to as flow. And flow is such a peak experience that it is a very strong argument for not resisting the seduction of total commitment. To most of the world, total commitment is a sign of misplaced values or even disease, and its practitioners are workaholics. But as I said at the beginning, these men and women are doing exactly what they want to do and loving every minute of it. They are a breed apart. They are strivers. They are always reaching higher than the next person, higher than the last time. And while their marriages may not be spectacularly successful, they find the rewards of their drive staggering. Money, influence, power, prestige, and the joys of flow. Just what is flow? And what are these joys? Sarah Caldwell described it very well as moments of magic. It is analogous to the high that joggers experience. A researcher has defined flow as a sensation present when we act with total involvement. During flow, action follows on action according to an internal logic that seems to need no conscious intervention on the part of the participant. There is no hurry, there are no distracting demands on attention. Moment flows into moment. Past and future disappear. So does the distinction between oneself and the activity. There was a report in one of the psychological journals several years ago about a surgeon who was so deeply involved in the surgery he was performing that he was completely unaware that part of the operatomogrant ceiling collapsed. It was only after the last stitch was taken in the last incision that he took a deep breath, stretched, looked around, and asked in surprise what saw that plaster on the floor. He had been in a state of flow. One of the pioneering studies on flow came about because a researcher wanted to know why some people play so hard. What do activities as different as chess and backgammon, tennis and handball, volleyball and football have in common that makes people give their all without any thought of reward? Plato asked this question centuries ago and never came up with a satisfactory answer. Freud asked the same question and never came up with an answer either. But Dr. Middleiki Kazimantelian of the University of Chicago isolated the common denominator. He questioned 175 people, 3 rock climbers, 3 basketball players, 3 modem dancers, 3 male chess players, 25 female chess players, 3 composers of modem music. What was it, he asked, that they enjoyed so much about composing music or playing chess or climbing steep rock faces? Was it the prestige, the glamour, the prospect of Lesson 34, 351, winning? It turned out that the chief attraction was the altered state of being they enjoyed while deeply involved in chess or basketball or whatever. When people achieve the state that we call flow, they are relaxed, but at the same time feel energetic and fresh. Their ability to concentrate increases markedly. They feel very much in control of themselves and their world. Like happiness, flow is a byproduct. The first requirement is to work as hard as you can at something that presents a challenge. Not an overwhelming challenge, but the kind that stretches you just a little, makes you realize that you are doing something better today than you did it yesterday or the last time you tried to do it. Another prerequisite is a significant span of uninterrupted time. It is virtually impossible to switch into a flow state in less than half an hour. And it is absolutely impossible if you are bedeviled by interruptions. It is possible, with practice, to switch yourself into flow by using a conditioning device in much the same way that you condition yourself to learn effectively. The secret is to analyze previous occasions when you enjoyed those magic moments. Was there any common denominator? Once you have isolated the common denominator, you can set the stage for flow. Margaret learned how to do this. She was a lobbyist based in Washington, D.C., working for a Western conservation group. One night she leaned back in her chair and stretched. It felt good. She had been working hard, pulling together a report on a bill before Congress that would set up new standards for the disposal of wastes from paper mills, a bill that, if passed, would have a direct and adverse effect on the lumber and pulp companies. She had outlined the present status of the bill, the lobbying efforts of the lumber and pulp interests, and her own activities, and had suggested certain steps to bring the situation to the attention of the public, whose surreptitious response might sway the legislators into placing conservation above corporate profits. Now she glanced at the clock, and then took a closer look. 4 o'clock in the morning. She checked her watch. The clock was right. She had been working on the report ever since she had finished supper the previous evening. She could have sworn that she had been at her desk for no more than 2 or 3 hours. She had been so engrossed in what she was doing that the time had raced by. Margaret had experienced this before. There had been days at the office now and again when she had looked up to find it empty and to realize that it was way after quitting time. On those 352 semester 7 days, she had always been so much caught up in whatever she was doing that the lunch hour slipped by without her even being conscious that she was hungry. By analyzing these episodes, she realized that they were similar, each triggered by the contemplation of a project or a phase of a project when she had gathered all the necessary data and was ready to start summing up the problem, outlining the positions taken by opposing interests, and making her recommendations for action. She also realized that it happened on days that were relatively quiet in the office, and no crises, no important meetings, no out-of-office VIPs. Once she had this clear in her mind, Margaret made a point of arranging her work so that she could take advantage of flow more frequently. Whenever she reached the trigger stage, she took her work home so that she could count on a stretch of uninterrupted time. And when she sat down at her desk on those days, she also used a verbal conditioning device, saying, "Now I am going to concentrate as hard as I can." It did not always work. There were times when she labored through her reports, but more and more often, she was able to glide into flow, where her concentration increased significantly. No one can or shoulder mine in a constant state of flow. It would be too draining, like an orgasm prolonged past endurance. The sexual analogy is not a frivolous one, for flow is not confined to work. The potential is inherent in everything we do that demands concentration, in games, painting, writing, learning, and, of course, sex. It is a truly euphoric state, the ecstasy, peak of total commitment. It is also a stressful state, because the whole organism is at a high pitch, but this is healthy stress. Researchers have found that successful people are healthier than those who are unsuccessful or only middlingly so. One study of very successful men showed that their mortality rate was 1/3 less than that of men in comparable age groups who had not achieved great success. And stress, so often considered to be debilitating, is a positive factor in their health. Some stress, of course, is debilitating, but it is important to realize that it can be healthful as well. Successful people enjoy the stress of coping with difficulties. They are attracted to what one researcher refers to as the call of controlled risk. They seek it because they are full of energy. They feel more vital when they are active. The active person's brain functions better than the sedentary person's brain, just as the active body functions better than the sedentary body. So flow stress makes for health, just as FISE, lesson 34, 353. Cal exertion does, just as change does. And just as all of these stress factors are dangerous in excess, so is flow. But don't worry about it. Your system is self-protecting. You will not be able to switch yourself into a flow state often enough to cause undue, unhealthy stress. It is all very well to talk about total commitment and the euphoria of flow, a businessman objected, but I know men and women who work like donkeys and never get anywhere. So do I, one agreed with him. And it's because they work like donkeys. Hard work is not enough. You have to have a goal. And you have to know how to make your hard work pay off. Total commitment is not just hard work, it is total involvement. Building a rock wall is backbreaking work. There are some people who build rock walls all their lives. And when they die, there are miles of walls, mute testimonials to how hard these people worked. But there are other men who build rock walls, and all the time that they are placing one rock on top of another, they have a vision in their minds, a goal. It may be a terrace with roses climbing over, the rock walk and chairs set out for lazy summer days. Or the rock wall may enclose an apple orchard or mark a boundary. When they have finished, they have more than a wall. It is the goal that makes the difference, as Beth's and Trudy's experiences show. Both got jobs as stewardesses. Both wanted to see the world. But Trudy wanted something more. She wanted to go into business. She thought she might like to have her own travel agency, or perhaps work for a hotel chain, something that involved travel. She was not sure exactly what. This job was her first step toward her goal. She would be traveling and learning about the world's great cities and about the kinds of people who travel her. They liked to go and why. She had a marvelous time and soaked up knowledge like the proverbial sponge. When passengers asked her questions about where they were going, she had all kinds of advice. I was just there 2 weeks ago, she would say, recommending a restaurant, and the food was really terribly good. I must have gained 5 pounds. She kept a notebook of her favorite places and loved to tell people about special shops and off-the-rack flexible restaurants. An airline executive who was flying incognito to check out service and personnel watched Trudy at work. She was quick and competent, always helpful. When she was not serving meals, Trudy would be holding a baby so its mother could stretch her legs, or answering passengers' questions about their destination. That girl's too good to waste as a stewardess, the inspector, 354, semester 7, said when he returned from the trip. She's a walking encyclopedia of what to do and see in every city we fly to. And she works her head off. A few weeks later, Trudy was offered a promotion. Her new job was working on a series of Citibitiki travel pamphlets. Today, 10 years later, she is head of her own travel agency, one of the most successful small agencies in the business. And what about Beth? Beth loved her job. Becoming a stewardess had been her goal. But in time, she became disenchanted. It was just plain hard work, grousing up and down the aisles, serving meals and taking trays away, answering questions, coping with drunks and bores and airsick passengers. 10 years later, Beth is still a stewardess. A very hard-working, conscientious one. She now has another goal, marriage. She figures that is the only way out of her dead-end job. In most respects, Beth worked just as leered as Trudy did. But Beth had no goal. And people who do not know where they want to go usually end up going nowhere. You know what it is you want out of life, and you are totally committed to working for it, then all sorts of opportunities open up. Many of them open up because of inertia. Other people's inertia, not yours. Everyone is basically lazy. Even the men and women who are blessed with boundless energy and burning to be successful. The secret is to understand this and promise yourself that you will not give in to you. Descendants will make it easy for the other fellow to give in to his. The way to do this is to maximize the possibility of success for the other person, emphasize the amount of effort he or she will have to make to achieve that success. Eric worked for a large accounting firm, which had a reputation for getting every last penny's worth out of its employees. Were being asked to do too much, Eric's colleagues would complain. This business of working late every night is crazy. They should hire more people. Eric listened and worked just a little harder. He decided that the only way to stand out from the other accountants was to do more work and to do it better. Searching for ways to do it better, he came up with a plan for reorganizing the workflow that would result in increased productivity. He worked out a table of reorganization, put it in memo form, and gave it to his boss. He had thought it out very carefully. His memo was neatly typed, but personal. Eric had done the typing himself, not asked one of the girls from the typing pool. He wanted it to be clear that this memo was for his boss alone, that the boss did not have to. Lesson 34. 355. Worry that Eric would go over his head and show it to someone higher up. More than that, Eric had not just outlined his plan for reorganization, he had indicated just how to achieve the reorganization. The boss liked the plan. All he would have to do would be say okay. Eric would take care of the rest. The boss liked the plan. He and Eric talked about it over sandwiches one night when they were working late. Eric indicated that if the office were reorganized, the increased productivity would make the boss look good to his superiors. He made it easy for the boss to say yes. Eric had done all the work. He had taken advantage of the boss' inertia. Eric's plan worked so well that the boss got a promotion. And who got promoted right along with him? Eric, of course. The boss needed someone who would make him look good. Eric is now on the executive level where he can talk to the other executives as an equal. And he got there several years ahead of the normal promotion schedule because he took advantage of the power of inertia. This is very important for the man or woman on the way up. The person who succeeds fastest is the one who does the too much and gets credit for it where it counts. The moralists think of total commitment as a disease. Think of it as the only way of life that will result in your attaining your goal of being fabulously successful in business. You will find that the sacrifices are insignificant in view of the fact that you are doing just what you want to do most. So when it comes to the seduction of total commitment, yield. The image you project, in many circumstances, is far more valuable than your skills or your record of past accomplishments. Michael Korda, Lesson 35, How to Look Like a Winner. You knew I'd get around to it, sooner or later, didn't you? What do people see when they glance in your direction? An obvious success, or a more obvious loser in life? And by what means, what value system, do they dare pass judgment on you? Stranger in some cases, so swiftly, you already know the answer by how you look, you kid or not, since success is what you're after. That outer image of you that is viewed by the world is nearly as important too, your upward progress, as that inner self-image you have already learned so much about in past lessons. Daniel Webster was correct when he said, the world is governed more by appearances than by realities. Fortunately, you can improve your outer image in much less time than it takes to change your inner one for the better. In this lesson from his book, success author and publishing executive Michael Korda will begin at the top of your head and teach you, step-sips, how you can acquire what he calls the look of a winner and the accoutrements of success. The world is filled with expensive status symbols, any of which can be purchased, provided you have the funds and the need for such ornaments in order to prove to yourself and others that you have arrived. But there is one symbol you can acquire, with a small investment of time, money, and common sense, that will provide you with more satisfaction than any other sweet look of success that you show the world, and that acquisition need not wait until you have your first million or been moved upstairs to executive row. 357, 358, Semester 7, you can, and you should, start dressing for maximum success today. And when you do, the rewards will amaze you. Yet, Skindy, may be true that beauty is only, but the fact remains that the world judges you on your appearance a great deal of the time. It will hardly help your rise to success if you look like a loser. If you're going to be a winner, you may as well begin by looking like one. Obviously, a great deal depends on the field in which you want to gain success. An ambitious rock guitar player may feel called upon to achieve some kind of distinction by striving for extreme eccentricity of dress and appearance, while someone whose ambition to rise within the ranks of it would be well advised to buy some white shirts and get a haircut. Only you can be sure of what standards are most likely to apply in your profession or job. In general, you cannot go very far wrong by adopting those of the more senior and successful people in your own organization. If you're not Paul Newman, Jen. Your face, of course, is what people see most of the time. There isn't a great deal you can do about that, nor do I believe that most men are willing to use makeup or resort to plastic surgery to correct any defects in this area. On the other hand, you can make the best of what you've got, even if you're not Paul Newman. A surprising number of men, for example, shave badly. This is odd, but I suspect that it's natural. Nobody ever teaches us how to shave. A great many otherwise well-to-met men begin the day with patches of stubble that they've missed in shaving, and end the day with a heavy growth of fresh beard. This is not the way successful people ought to look. Learn to shave yourself carefully and well. Switch razors and shaving cream until you find a combination that works. If you have a heavy beard, keep an electric razor in your desk drawer and use it. The healthy outdoors look, which is perhaps the greatest success symbol of all, does not necessarily have to be acquired on a 40-foot racing sloop in Hope Sound. Pouches under your eyes, as well as bloodshot eyes, will respond quickly to fresh air, exercise, and a reasonable reduction in the amount you smoke. And Lesson 35. 359. Drink. Your face should project energy, not fatigue and dissipation. and given the fact that most of us work indoors, it needs all the help it can get. Try to look at your face as if it were that of a stranger, which should be easy in the early morning, and ask yourself if you've really done the best you can with it. Would you look better if your hair were slightly longer? Do you part your hair on the left side because your mother always parted it that way, or is it really the best choice for your face? If your ears stick out, would it help to let your hair grow fuller at the sides? It may be a good idea to spend some money on having your hair styled, but remember that the aim is a simple, natural appearance. If you end up with a hairstyle that requires hotari combing, spray, and anti-humidity cream, you will not only get bored with the process, but it will almost certainly look artificial. Understandably, those whose problem is baldness may want to give some thought to wearing a wig. But a word of warning is in order here. Wigs are not only objects of mirth to a lot of people, but also represent a kind of dishonesty, since you are pretending to have more hair than is in fact the case. If there is the slightest chance that your wig will be noticed, or even suspected, don't do it. Once you have been caught out as a wig wearer, nobody is likely to trust you about anything else. It will be the only thing that most people will remember about you. My own personal opinion is that it is usually better to accept fate and go frankly bald into the world. After all, you have plenty of company. Fate may not have handed you a perfect set of teeth, and you may not want to go to the expense and pain of having them capped unless you're an actor. But there is no reason not to have them professionally cleaned as often as is necessary. If you're a heavy smoker, the more often they're scaled by your dentist, the better. Yellow teeth turn people off. As far as nails go, I do not think that most men want a professional manicure, and I am myself inclined to distrust men whose fingernails are buffed and polished. But they should at least be short, trim, and clean, and surprisingly, often they're not. Glasses, it is worthwhile paying some attention to the glasses you select, not only because they serve as a useful prop or cueing device, but because it's one of the few areas in which you can legitimately develop a personal style or trademark of your own. Get a pair that does something for your face. Simple gold frames, 36. Semester 7, are usually best. However, the latest status symbol is the large Ray-Ban aviator goggles. Fashionable as these are, beware if you have a small face, they tend to make you look like a chipmunk. Avoid colored plastic frames after gold. Real or imitation tortoiseshell is next best. One exception in the world of high-wasp academia, the proper frame G is made of transparent Fleskelhord plastic, with very small lenses and very narrow citipiece. Glasses with metal decorations or decorative inserts are out. Do not go to purchase a pair of frames without first clipping a few photographs of people wearing the kind of glasses that you think would look good on you. Unless you know what you are looking for, you are likely to walk out of the shop in a daze. The variety of styles available now is bewildering. Clothes, most business people worry a lot about their clothing. And, looking at the average business convention, one can easily see why the number of men who genuinely manage to dress for success is very small. You want to be successful. You can speed up the process by dressing the right way. And it needn't cost you a great deal of money. Remember, how you wear your clothes is almost as important as what you wear. One of the peculiarities of people's attitudes toward clothing is that they start to dress for success when they become successful. This is a mistake. Dress for maximum success now. Your object is to set yourself apart from other people in a quiet, dignified, but unmistakable manner, and to show that you are a winner. You look at the senior members of your organization or profession, you will almost always find that they wear plain dark blue or dark gray suits, with or without a muted pattern nor a stripe. It costs no more to buy a blue suit than one in brown or green or some nubbly tweed pattern that looks as if it had been designed as an upholstery fabric for a chain of cheap motels. There is no occasion during the business day or evening when a dark blue or dark gray suit is inappropriate. In anything else, you have at least a 50% chance of looking out of place. At the upper level of success, a certain status is attached to such tailors as Morty Sills, Dunhol's, or Roll and Melodhenry in New York, and Huntsman or Hawes and Curtis, Limited, in London. It is possible to spend nearly $1,000 on a plain suit, and if you can afford to, why not? The pleasure of having it made, and the fact that you are wearing a visible status symbol may make it less than 361 seem like a worthwhile investment. However, this kind of perfection is only recognizable to a small number of people, most of them attired at similar expense, and is beyond the reach of the average person. You can spend whatever you normally spend, but make sure it is simple, single-subrist, and either dark blue the darker, the better, or dark gray. The cloth should not have any fancy, textured pattern. It is also important to avoid contrasting stitching or piping pockets with buttons on them and lapels so wide that they come out to your shoulders. Look for the kind of suit you would expect a banker or a clergyman to wear. When you have found it, be ruthless about alterations. It is not all that important how much the suit costs, but it must fit. Nothing makes a man look more like a failure than a poorly fitted suit. If you are thin, have the jacket waist taken in to produce a slightly flared look. If you are not thin, adopt the old-fashioned Brooks Brothers look in which the sides of the jacket hang more or less straight down. Do not go in for exaggerated suppressed waists, the so-called continental look, unless you want to be mistaken for a bookie or a gigolo. The left lapel of your suit should have a buttonhole. It is correct, it is traditional, and it belongs there. There should be at least 3 buttons on the sleeve cuffs of a suit, and if possible, 4. If the suit only has 2, ask for a third one to be sewn on, or get it done yourself. Ideally, the sleeve buttons should be rage. That is, you should be able to button and unbutton them, but to get this small, correct touch you have to go to a tailor. Another thing to beware of in having a jacket altered is the collar at the neck. It is vital that the collar be raised high enough so that it's close to the back of the neck rather than hanging away from it as most do. This is the kind of thing you have to be firm about. Insist on putting down a partial payment on your suit, the balance to be paid when you are satisfied with the alterations, and make sure you are satisfied. Trousers are almost always worn too short. Nothing looks worse than a man whose ankles show when he's standing up. You must insist that the trousers be long enough to break gently over the shoes. Whether they have cuffs or not doesn't matter. Thunig, in fact, cuffs make the trousers hang better by adding a bit of weight to the bottoms. If the trousers are cuffies, have them cut at an angle so that they come down lower over the heels of your shoes than they do at front. Any alterations tailor can do this. Beware of trousers that are too long or baggy at the bottoms, since this tends to give your legs a certain elephantine graceless. 362. Semester 7, Ness. It is difficult to avoid trousers that have a mild bell-bottom these days, but try. It is not a flattering look for most men, and should only be worn by people who have long, thin legs. For short people, it is a disaster, since there is seldom enough length between the jacket bottom and the knees to give the long, sweeping, flared look that seems so striking when the trousers are worn by a six-foital model. A carefully fitted suit is worth the time and trouble it takes, even if it means a certain amount of argument. Off the rack doesn't mean it has to fit like a sack. A little bit of care goes a long way too. Successful people seldom appear rumpled and sweaty, and that's no reason why you should either. A sudden downpour can make your suit look like something an Arab camel driver wouldn't wear. It's useful to keep a freshly pressed suit in your office, ready for emergencies. In general, you should own enough suits so that you don't have to continue wearing them after the trouser crease has gone. If you suffer from dandruff, go see a dermatologist, but in the meantime, keep a clothes brush in your desk drawer and use it. Your object is to appear cool, unruffled, and self-ignited at all times. Dress as if you expected to be promoted to the board of directors at any minute, and perhaps you will be. One way to appear cool is to avoid heavy fabrics. Most offices are overheated to begin with. Don't compound the problem by wearing a winter suit that brings you out in a sweat. Buy the heaviest overcoat you can find, and wear the same lightweight suits you owned. It's a good way to save money, and you'll increase your comfort at the same time. Duplicate fabrics have the immense advantage of holding their shape and are particularly good for travel. On the other hand, they never seem to look quite as crisp as ordinary fabrics, and most of them are manufactured in strange and unappealing colors. If you can find one in gray or dark blue, add it to your wardrobe and use it for traveling. If it comes with fancy buttons, as many seem to, have them removed and replaced with ordinary black ones. Blazers should be dark blue, single subrist with plain gold buttons. They should never have a badge on the right breast and should always be worn with dark gray trousers. If you're in the kind of business where you can get away with a sports jacket from time to time, pick a very lightweight tweed in a subdued and small check, and have the leather buttons replaced with plain bone ones. Personally, I think it's okay to have suede less than 35. 363. Patches on the sleeves if you've owned the sports jacket for a decade or so and the sleeves are giving out. But it's ridiculous to buy a new sports jacket with suede patches on the elbows. The accoutrements of success shirts, despite much that is said to the contrary, a simple white shirt looks better than anything else when worn with a suit. If you can find plain white, 100% cotton shirts with button-down collars, you have it made. The Orvis Company sells just such a shirt by mail, made of pure cotton with no artificial fibers. There is a cult of fancy shirts, but my own experience is that men look best in plain ones, and that most successful people either wear white shirts or blue shirts, with an occasional very narrow, understated stripe in a muted color. One basic rule: short sleeves are out. A man who doesn't have a good inch of shirt cuff showing when he's wearing his suit jacket looks naked. It is also a mistake to put anything in your shirt pocket if there is one. Shirt pockets are purely decorative, and a row of ballpoint pens and pencils clipped in one merely makes you look like a filing clerk. Despite the contemporary passion for shirt collars that look like the wings of some giant bird, the successful look demands restraint and common sense in this area. The shirt collar should look natural and feel comfortable, and if it comes with little slots for plastic collar stays, use them and keep a good supply. A crumpled shirt collar looks messy and unkempt. I suspect that most men are happier with buttons on their cuffs than with cuff links. But remember, if you are going to wear cuff links, they should be as simple and inconspicuous as possible. It doesn't matter how much they cost, they shouldn't draw attention to themselves. Plain gold ones are probably best, though these are usually worn by people who inherited them. During the Nixon years, there was a great deal of status attached to the small, enameled cufflinks bearing the seal of the President of the United States that Mr. Nixon gave away to White House visitors. These were kept in what John Ehrlichman referred to as the Mickey Mouse drawer of the president's desk, and can still be seen on the cuffs of Nixon loyalists. A number of organizations put out similar cufflinks with small enameled devices on. 364. Semester 7.